He looked down. His stomach had been cut open. He could see, oh God, he could see himself, his gut, the meat of his organs, displayed like winding snakes of offal in a butcher's case. One of the boys was pawing at him. "They cut me open!" he screamed, doubled over. He clutched his stomach. He was whole. He was in a room he didn't recognize, some kind of office, polished wood everywhere. It smelled new. The sunlight was so bright it hurt his eyes. But he wasn't safe from those boys. They'd followed him here. They wanted to kill him. They'd taken him from his good spot at the train yard. They'd offered him money. He knew they wanted to have their fun, but he hadn't known, he didn't know. They'd cut him open. They were trying to take his soul. He couldn't let them drag him back to that cold room. There was protection here. If he could only find it. He reached for the desk, pulling open drawers. They seemed too far away, as if his arms were shorter than he remembered. Birdie? That wasn't his name. They were trying to confuse him. He looked down and saw a black shape in his hand. It looked like a shadow, but it felt heavy in his palm. He knew the name for it, tried to form the word for it in his mind. There was a gun in his hand, and a woman was screaming. She was pleading. But she wasn't a woman, she was something terrible. He could see night gathered around her. The boys had sent her to bring him back, so they could cut him open again. Lightning flashed, but the sky was still blue. Daisy. He was supposed to protect her. She was crawling across the floor. She was weeping. She was trying to get away. There, a monster, staring back at him from above the mantel, his white face filled with horror and rage. They'd come for him, and he had to stop them. There was only one way to do it. He had to ruin their fun. He turned the shadow in his hand, pressed it to his gut. Another flash of lightning. When had the storm come on? He looked down and saw that his chest had come apart. He'd done the work. Now they couldn't cut him open. They couldn't take his soul. He was on the floor. He saw sunlight crisscrossing the slats, a beetle crawling over the dusty floorboards. Daisy, he knew her, lay still beside him, the roses fading from her cheeks, her wicked, lively eyes gone cold. 22. Winter. Alex staggered backward, nearly knocking the tray from the table where Dawes had placed it. She clutched her chest, expecting to find an open wound there. Her mouth was full of food, and she realized that she'd been standing in front of the tray, shoveling macaroni into her mouth, as she relived North's death. She could still sense him inside her, oblivious, lost to the sensations of eating for the first time in more than 100 years. With all of her will, she shoved him from her, resealing the breach that had allowed him inside. She spat out the macaroni, gasped for air, lurched to the edge of the crucible. The only face looking back at her from the surface of the water was her own. She slapped her hand against it, watching the ripples spread. "You killed her," she whispered. "I saw you kill her. I felt it." But even as she said it, she knew she hadn't been North in that moment. There had been someone else inside him. Alex stumbled down the hall to the Dante bedroom and pulled on a pair of Lethe house sweats. It felt like days had passed, but it had only been hours. There was a lingering soreness where her ribs had been broken, the only sign of the beating she'd endured. And yet she was so tired. Each day had started to feel like a year, and she wasn't sure if it was the physical trauma or the heavy exposure to the uncanny that was wearing her down. Afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, leaving bright patterns of blue and yellow on the polished slats of the floor. Maybe she would sleep here tonight, even if it did mean she had to go to class in sweats. She was literally running out of clothes. These attempts on her life were playing havoc with her wardrobe. The bathroom off the big bedroom had 2 standing pedestal sinks and a deep claw-footed tub that she'd never used. Had Darlington? She had trouble imagining him sinking into a bubble bath to relax. She cupped her hand beneath the sink to drink, then spat into the basin. Alex flinched back. The water was pink and speckled with something. She stoppered the drain before it could vanish. She was looking at North's blood. She felt sure of it. Blood he had himself swallowed nearly 100 years ago when he died. And parsley. Little bits of it. She remembered Michael Reyes lying unconscious on an operating table, the bonesmen gathered around him. Dove's heart for clarity, geranium root, a dish of bitter herbs. The diet of the victima before a prognostication. There had been someone inside North that day at the factory, someone who had been used by Bones for a prognostication, long before there was a Leigh house around to keep watch. They cut me open. They wanted to see my soul. They'd let him die. She felt sure of it. Some nameless vagrant who would never be missed. NMDH. No more dead hobos. She'd seen the inscription in Leigh, a legacy. A little joke among the old boys of the 9th house. Alex hadn't quite believed it somehow, even after she'd seen Michael Reyes cut open on a table. She should check on him, make sure he was okay. Alex let the sink drain. She rinsed her mouth again, wrapped her wet hair in a fresh towel, and sat down at the little antique desk by the window. Bones had been founded in 1832. They hadn't built their tomb until 25 years later, but that didn't mean they weren't trying their hand at rituals before that. No one had been keeping an eye on the societies back then, and she remembered what Darlington had said about stray magic breaking loose from the rituals. What if something had gone wrong with that early prognostication? What if a Grey had disrupted the rite, sent the victim's spirit flying wild? What if it had found its way into North? He hadn't even seemed to recognize that he was holding a gun, a shadow in my hand. The terrified victima inside North, North inside Alex. They were like a nesting doll of the uncanny. Had the spirit somehow chosen North's body to escape to, or had he and Daisy simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, 2 innocent people mowed down by power they couldn't begin to understand? Was that what Darlington had been investigating? That stray magic had caused the North Whitlock murder? Alex climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. She'd spent little time here, but she found the Virgil bedroom on her 2nd try. It was directly above the Dante room, but far more grand. Alex supposed that if she survived 3 years of Leigh and Yale, it would one day be hers. She went to the desk and opened the drawers. She found a note with a few lines of poetry inside, some stationery stamped with the Leigh hound, and not much else. There was a statistics textbook on the desk. Had Darlington left it there the night they'd gone to the basement of Rosenfeld Hall? Alex padded back down the stairs to the bookshelf that guarded the library. She pulled down the Albemarle book. The smell of horses rose from its pages, the sound of hooves on cobblestones, a snatch of Hebrew, the memory of the research she'd done on golems. Darlington had used the library regularly and the books rows were full of his requests, but most seemed focused on feeding his obsession with New Haven, manufacturing history, land deeds, city planning. There were entries from Dawes too, all about tarot and ancient mystery cults, and even a few from Dean Sando. But then there it was, early in the fall semester, 2 names in Darlington's jagged scrawl, Bertram Boyce North and Daisy Whitlock. The bridegroom was right. Darlington had been looking into his case. But where were his notes? Had they been in his satchel that night at Rosenfeld and been swallowed up with the rest of him? "Where are you, Darlington?" she whispered. "And can you forgive me?" "Alex." She jumped. Dawes was standing at the top of the stairs, her headphones clamped around her neck, a dish rag in her hands. "Turner's back." He has something to show us. Alex retrieved her socks from the armory and joined Turner and Dawes in the parlor. They sat shoulder to shoulder at a clunky-looking laptop, matching frowns on their faces. Turner had changed into jeans and a button-down shirt, but still managed to look sharp, especially next to Dawes. He waved Alex over, a stack of folders piled beside him. On the screen, Alex saw black and white footage of what looked like a prison hallway, a row of inmates moving along a corridor of cells. "Look at the timestamp," said Turner. "That's right about the time you were headed into my crime scene." Turner hit play and the inmates shuffled forward. A huge shape lumbered into view. "That's him," said Alex. It was unmistakably Lance Gressing. "Where does he go?" "He turns a corner and then he's just gone." He struck a few keys and the scene changed to a different angle on another hallway, but Alex didn't see Gressing anywhere. "Here's number 1 on the long list of things I don't understand. Why did he go back?" Turner hit the keys again and Alex saw a wide view of what looked like a hospital ward. "Gressing went back to jail?" "That's right. He's in the infirmary with a busted hand." Alex remembered the crunch of bones when she'd hit him with the putter. But why the hell would Gressing have returned to jail to await trial? "Are these for me?" Alex asked, gesturing at the folders. Turner nodded. "That's everything we have on Lance Gressing and Tara Hutchins right now. Look your fill, but they're going back with me tonight." Alex took the stack to the velvet sofa and settled in. "Why such generosity?" "I'm stubborn, not stupid. I know what I saw." Turner leaned back in his chair. "So let's hear it, Alex Stern. You don't think Gressing did the murder? Who's responsible?" Alex flipped open the top folder. "I don't know, but I do know Tara has connections to at least 4 societies, and you don't get stabbed over the occasional 20 bag, so this isn't about a little weed." "How do you tally 4 societies?" "I'll get the whiteboard," said Dawes. "Is it a magical whiteboard?" asked Turner sourly. Dawes cast him a baleful look. "All whiteboards are magical." She returned with a handful of markers and a whiteboard that she propped up on the mantel. Turner rubbed a hand over his face. "Okay, give me your list of suspects." Alex felt suddenly self-conscious, like she was being asked to work a complicated math problem in front of the class, but she took a blue marker from Dawes and went to the board. 4 of the Ancient 8 may have connections to Tara: Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key, Manuscript, and Book and Snake. "The Ancient 8, asked Turner. "The Houses of the Vale. The societies with tombs. You should have read your Life of Lethe." Turner waved her on. "Start with Skull and Bones. Tara was selling weed to Trip Helmuth, but I don't see how that's a motive for murder. She was also sleeping with Trip." "You think it was more than casual?" "I doubt it," Alex admitted. "But if Tara thought so?" asked Dawes tentatively. "I'm guessing Tara knew the score." "You had to. All the time. Still, Trip's family is real old money. She might have tried to get something out of him." "That sounds like a soap opera motive," said Turner. "He wasn't going to be an easy sell." "But what if they were dealing in harder stuff? Not just pot?" "I think a senior named Blake Keeley was getting a drug called Meridy from them." "That's impossible," said Dawes. "It only grows." "I know, on some mountaintop. But Blake bought from Lance and Tara. Tripp said he saw Tara with Kate Masters, and Kate is in Manuscript, the only society with access to Meridy." "You think Kate sold Meridy to Tara and Lance?" asked Dawes. "No," said Alex, turning the idea over in her head. "I think Kate paid Tara to find a way to grow it. Lance and Tara lived within spitting distance of the forestry school and the marsh greenhouses. Kate wanted to cut out the middleman. Get manuscript its own supply. But then, how did Blake get his hands on it? Maybe they started growing their own stash of Moriarty and sold it to Blake. Money is money. But that would be unethical, asked Alex. Irresponsible? Like handing a sociopathic toddler a magical machete? What exactly does this drug do? Turner sounded reluctant, as if he wasn't sure he wanted to know. It makes you, Alex hesitated. Obedient wasn't the right word. Eager. Didn't cover it either. An acolyte, said Dawes. Your only desire is to serve. Turner shook his head. And let me guess, it isn't a regulated substance because no one's ever heard of it to regulate it. He had the same nauseated expression he'd worn when he saw Alex healed by the crucible. All you children playing with fire, looking surprised when the house burns down. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Back to the board. Tara is connected to Bones by Tripp, manuscript by Kate Masters and this drug. Is Colin Cattry her only connection to Scroll and Key? No, said Alex. She had words from a poem called Idols of the King tattooed on her arm, and that text is all over the locksmith's tomb. She passed the file full of photos to Dawes. Right forearm. Dawes glanced at the autopsy photos displaying Tara's tattoos, then shuffled hurriedly past. That doesn't feel like a casual connection, said Alex. What's this? Dawes asked, tapping a photo of Tara's bedroom. Just a bunch of jewelry-making tools, said Turner. She had a little business on the side. Of course she had. That was what girls did when their lives fell apart. They tried to find a window to climb out of. Community college. Homemade soaps. A little jewelry-making business on the side. Dawes was gnawing at her lower lip hard enough that Alex thought she might draw blood. Alex leaned over and peered at the picture, at the cheap knockoff gemstones and dishes of curved hooks for earrings, the pliers. But one of the dishes looked different than the others. It was shallower, the metal beaten and raw, the leavings of something like ash or a ring of lime around its base. Dawes, said Alex. What does that look like to you? Dawes pushed the file away as if she could banish it. It's a crucible. What would Tara have used it for? To process the Moriarty? Dawes shook her head. No. Moriarty is used in its raw form. Hey, said Turner. How about we pretend for a minute I don't know what a crucible is? Dawes tucked a strand of her auburn hair behind her ear and without looking at him said, they're vessels created for magical and alchemical use. They're usually made of pure gold and highly reactive. That big gold bathtub Dawes just put me in is a crucible, said Alex. You're telling me the thing in Tara's apartment is real gold? It's the size of an ashtray. No way Gressang and his girl could afford something like that. Unless it was a gift, said Alex. And unless whatever they were making in it was worth more than the metal itself. Dawes pulled her sweatshirt sleeves over her hands. There are stories about holy men who would use psilocybin, mushrooms, to literally open doorways to other worlds. But the drugs had to be purified, in a crucible. Doorways, said Alex, remembering the night she and Darlington had observed the botched ritual at Scroll and Key. You mean portals? You said there are rumors of the magic at Scroll and Key failing. Could Lance and Tara's secret sauce have helped with that? Dawes expelled a long breath. Yes. In theory, a drug like that could help facilitate opening the portals. Alex picked up the photo of the tiny crucible. Do you have this stuff in, custody or whatever? In evidence, said Turner. Yes, we do. If there's enough residue left in that thing we can have it tested, see if it matches the hallucinogen we found in Tara's system. Dawes had taken her headphones from around her neck. She sat with them cradled in her lap like a sleeping animal. What is it? Alex asked her. You said Lance was walking through walls, maybe using portal magic to attack you. If someone from Scroll and Key allowed outsiders access to their tomb, if they brought Lance and Tara into their rituals. The Houses of the Vale consider that unforgivable. Nefandom. Alex and Turner exchanged a glance. What's the penalty for sharing that kind of information with outsiders? Alex asked. Dawes clutched her headphones. The society would be stripped of its tomb and disbanded. You know what that sounds like, said Turner. Yeah, replied Alex. Motive. Had Colin Cattry inducted Lance and Tara into the secrets of the society? Had it been some kind of payment, one he didn't want to continue to make? Was that what had gotten Tara killed? It was hard for Alex to imagine clean, cheerful Colin committing violent murder. But he was a boy with a bright future, and that meant he had plenty to lose. I'm going to Professor Bellbaum's salon tonight, said Alex. She would have preferred to fall asleep right here in front of the fire, but she didn't intend to piss off the one person who seemed to be looking out for her future. Colin works for Bellbaum. I can try to find out how late he stayed at her house the night Tara died. Alex, Dawes said quietly, looking up at last. If Darlington found out about the drugs, about what Colin and the other locksmiths were doing with Lance and Tara, maybe, she trailed off, but Alex knew what she was suggesting. Maybe Scroll and Key had been responsible for the portal that had disappeared Darlington that night in the Rosenfeld basement. Where is Darlington? Asked Turner. And if you say Spain, I'm going to pack up my files and go home. My bed is looking real good right now. Dawes squirmed in her chair. Something happened to him, said Alex. We're not sure what. There's a ritual to try to reach him, but it can only be attempted at the new moon. Why the new moon? The timing matters, said Dawes. For a ritual to work, it helps if it's built around an auspicious date or an auspicious place. The new moon represents the moment before something hidden is revealed. Sando wanted you to keep it quiet, asked Turner. Alex nodded, feeling guilty. She hadn't exactly wanted to trumpet the news either. What about Darlington's family? Darlington is our responsibility, said Dawes sharply, protective to the last. We'll get him back. Maybe. Turner leaned forward. So what you're saying is that Scroll and Key may be involved in a murder and a kidnapping? Alex shrugged. Sure. Let's call it that. But we can't rule out manuscript. Maybe Kate Masters found out Tara sold the Meridian to Blake Keeley and that he was using it on girls, or maybe something went wrong with their deal. If Lance didn't kill Tara, someone was glamored to look like him. Manuscript has plenty of tricks and gimmicks that would let Kate spend a few hours wearing his face. And none of this explains the glooma that was sent after me. Alex reached into her pocket and felt the reassuring tick of the watch. Turner looked like he might do murder himself. The what now? The thing that chased me down Elm. Don't fucking look at me like that. It happened. Fine, it happened, said Turner. Gloomy are servants of the dead, said Dawes. They're errand boys. Alex scowled. That was a highly homicidal errand boy. You give them a simple task, they accomplish it. Book and Snake uses them as messengers to and from the other side of the veil. They're too violent and unpredictable to really be good for much else. Except for making a girl look crazy, and maybe shutting her up permanently. So Book and Snake is on the board, said Turner. Motive unknown. You realize none of this is evidence, right? We can draw no credible connections to these societies beyond what Tripp told you. I don't even have enough to get a warrant to look inside those forestry greenhouses. I'm guessing Centurion can pull all kinds of strings with his superiors. A shadow crossed Turner's face. Except you don't want to pull strings. That isn't the way things should work. And I can't just go to my captain. He doesn't know about Lethe. I'd have to go all the way up the chain to the chief. And Turner wasn't going to make that move unless he was sure that all of their theories added up to more than some lunatic scrawl on a whiteboard. Alex couldn't blame him. I'll pull the LUDs for the liquor store near Tara's apartment. It's possible they were using the store's phone to do business. Kate Masters wasn't in Tara's cell or Lance's. Neither was Colin Cattry or Blake Keeley. If Tara and Lance were using the greenhouses, then they were working with someone at the forestry school, said Dawes. Warrant or not, we should try to find out who. I'm a student, said Alex. I can walk right in. I thought you wanted me to start pulling strings, Turner said. She had, but now she was thinking better of it. We can handle this on our own. If you go up the food chain, someone might tell Sando. Turner raised a brow. That a problem? I want to know where he was the night of the murder. Dawes's spine straightened. Alex. He pushed to make me stop looking, Dawes. Lethe is here to keep the societies in line. Why did he yank so hard on the reins? We are the shepherds. Lethe had been built on that mission. Or had it? Had Lethe ever really been intended to protect anyone? Or were they just supposed to maintain the status quo, to make it look like the houses of the Vale were being monitored, that some standard was being kept to without ever really checking the society's power? This is a funding year. Had Sando somehow known that if they looked too closely, they'd find connections to the society rosters? Bones, Book and Snake, Scroll and Key, Manuscript, 4 of the 8 societies responsible for funding Lethe. That added up to half the money needed to keep the 9th house alive, more since Berzelius never paid in. Was Lethe that precious to Sando? What kind of salary does Dean Sando get from Lethe? Alex asked. Dawes blinked. I don't actually know. But he has tenure. He makes plenty from the university. Gambling, suggested Turner. Drugs? Debt? Dawes's spine seemed to straighten even more, as if she were an antenna being adjusted to receive information. Divorce, she said slowly, reluctantly. His wife left him 2 years ago. They've been in court ever since. Still. It's probably nothing, said Alex, though she wasn't at all sure that was true. But it couldn't hurt to know where he was that night. Dawes's teeth dug into her lip again. Dean Sando would never do anything to hurt Lethe. Turner rose and began to collect his folders. For the right price, he just might. Why do you think I said yes to being Centurion? It's an honor, protested Dawes. It's a job, on top of the very intense job I already have. But the money meant I could pay down my mother's mortgage. He slid the folders into a messenger bag. I'll see what I can find out about Sando without tipping him off. I should do it, Dawes said quietly. I can talk to his housekeeper. If you start asking questions, Yelena will go to Sando right away. Do you feel up to that? Turner said skeptically. She can handle it, said Alex. We just need a look at his schedule. I like money as a motive, said Turner. Nice and clean. None of this hocus-pocus bullshit. He shrugged into his coat and headed for the back door. Alex and Dawes followed. Turner paused with the door open. Behind him, Alex could see the sky turning the deep blue of dusk, the street lamps coming on. My mother couldn't just take the check, he said, a rueful smile on his lips. She knows cops don't get bonuses. She wanted to know where the money came from. Did you tell her? Asked Alex. About all this? Hell no. I said I hit a lucky streak at Foxwoods. But she still knew I'd gotten myself into something I shouldn't have. Mothers are like that, said Dawes. Were they? Alex thought of the photo her mom had texted her the week before. She'd had one of her friends snap a picture of her in the apartment. Mira had been wearing a Yale sweatshirt, the mantel behind her crowded with crystals. "Do you know what my mother said?" Turner asked. "She told me there's no doorway the devil doesn't know. He's always waiting to stick his foot in." I never really believed her until tonight. Turner pulled up his collar and disappeared into the cold. 23. Winter. Alex trudged upstairs to retrieve her boots from the armory. The crucible had healed her wounds, but she was short on sleep and her body knew it. Still, if she'd had a choice, she thought she might take another brawl, even with a bruiser like Lance, rather than face the salon tonight, classes tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. When she was fighting for her life, it was strictly pass/fail. All she had to do was survive, and she could call it a win. Even sitting in the parlor with Dawes and Turner, she'd felt like she was keeping up, not just playing along. She didn't want to go back to feeling like a fraud. "But you are still pretending," she reminded herself. Dawes and Turner didn't really know her. They never would have guessed at what Darlington had learned about her past. And if the new moon rite worked? If Darlington returned 2 days from now and told them all the truth, would anyone speak for her then? Alex found a stack of clothes on her bed in the Dante room. "I brought them from my apartment," Dawes said, hovering in the doorway, hands curled into her sleeves. "They're not stylish, but they're better than sweats. I know you like black, so..." "They're perfect." They weren't. The jeans were too long and the shirt had been washed so many times it was closer to gray than black, but Dawes hadn't needed to share her closet. Alex wanted to soak up every kindness while she still could. As she set out for Bellbaum's house, Alex felt jumpy. She'd wound her watch tight in case the Gluma was stalking her, stuffed a jar of graveyard dirt into her satchel, placed 2 magnets in her pocket, and studied the signs of warding needed to close a portal temporarily. They felt like small protections. The list of suspects in Tara's murder had become a list of possible threats, and they were all packing too much magical firepower. Bellbaum lived on St. Ronan, a 20-minute walk north from Isle Bastogne, not far from the Divinity School. Her house was one of the smaller ones on the street, 2 stories high, and built of red brick covered in gray vines like an old woman's hair. Alex entered through a garden gate beneath a white lattice arch, and the same sense of calm she'd felt in Bellbaum's office descended over her. The garden smelled of mint and marjoram. Alex paused on the path. It was some kind of crushed gravel the color of slate. Through the tall windows, she could see a circle of people gathered in a variety of chairs, a few crowded onto a piano bench, some on the floor. She glimpsed glasses of red wine, plates poised on knees. A boy with a beard and a wild mane of curls was reading from something. She felt like she was looking into another Yale, a Yale beyond Lethe and the societies, one that might open and keep opening if she could just learn its rituals and codes. At Darlington's house she had felt like a trespasser. Here she had been invited. She might not belong, but she was welcome. She knocked softly at the door and, when there was no answer, pushed gently. It was unlocked, as if there were never unwanted visitors. There were coats hung in heaps and in piles along a row of hooks. The floor was littered with boots. Bellbaum saw her hovering in the door and gestured Alex toward the kitchen. Then Alex understood. She was staff. Of course she was staff. Thank God she was staff and wouldn't have to try to pretend to be anything else. Over Bellbaum's shoulder, Alex spotted Dean Sando talking to 2 students on a settee. She slipped into the kitchen, hoping he hadn't seen her, and then wondered why she should worry about it. Did she really think he had hurt Tara? That he was capable of something that gruesome? In the parlor back at Isle Bastogne, it had seemed possible, but here, in this place of warmth and easy conversation, Alex couldn't quite get her head around it. The kitchen was vast, the cupboards white, the countertops black, the floor a clean checkerboard. "Alex," crowed Colin when she appeared. "Murder suspects on all sides. I didn't know you were coming. We need extra hands. What are you wearing?" "Black is fine, but next time a white button-down." Alex didn't own a white button-down. "Okay," she said. "Just come over here and set these on a baking sheet." Alex fell into the rhythm of following orders. Isabel Andrews, Bellbaum's other assistant, was there too, arranging fruit and pastries and mysterious stacks of meats on different platters. The food they were serving seemed utterly foreign to her. When Colin said to hand him the cheese, it took her a long moment to realize it was right in front of her, not platters of cubed cheddar but giant hunks of what looked like quartz and iolite, a tiny pot of honey, a spray of almonds. All of it art. "After the readings and the talk they'll do dessert," Colin explained. "She always does meringues and mini tarts aux poems." "Was Dean Sando here last week?" Alex asked. If he had been, then Alex could cross him off their list, and if Colin didn't know, then maybe he hadn't really been at the salon all night. But before he could answer, Professor Bellbaum sailed through the swinging doors. "Of course he was," she said. "That man loves to drink my bourbon." She popped a tiny wild strawberry into her mouth and wiped her fingers on a towel. "He said the most inane thing about Camus. But it's hard not to be inane about Camus. I'm not sure why I expected better. He has a Rumi quote framed beside his desk. It pains me. Darling Colin, please make sure we always have white and red at hand." She held up an empty bottle and Colin's face went ashen. "It's all right, love. Grab a bottle and come join us. Alex and the others can keep things under control here, yes? Did you bring something to read?" Yes." Colin drifted from the kitchen as if his ankles had just sprouted wings. "Meringues," commanded Isabel. "Meringues," repeated Alex, walking over to the mixer and handing the bowl to Isabel. She snapped a picture of the kitchen for her mom and texted, "At work." This was the way she wanted Mira to think of her. Happy. Normal. Safe. Everything Alex had never been. She texted Mercy and Lauren too. At Bellbaum's salon. Fingers crossed for leftovers. "I cannot believe Colin gets to read tonight," Isabel complained, piping the meringue onto a baking sheet. "I've been with her a semester longer than he has, and I aced her Women in Industrialism seminar." "Next time," murmured Alex, brushing melted butter over the tiny apple tarts. "Was it this crowded last week?" "Yes, and Colin bitched the entire night. We were here cleaning up until after 2. Then Colin's alibi was good." Alex felt a rush of relief. She liked Colin, liked sour Isabel, liked this kitchen, this house, this comfortable space. She liked this piece of world that had nothing to do with murder or magic. She didn't want to see it disrupted by brutality. But that didn't mean she could cross Olive Scroll and Key off her list. Even if Colin hadn't killed Tara, he'd known her. And someone had taught Lance portal magic. Did Sando stick around for the whole salon last week? "Unfortunately," said Isabel. "He always drinks way too much. Apparently, he's been going through some kind of awful divorce." Professor Bellbaum tucked him away in her study with a blanket. He left a ring of urine around the powder room toilet that Colin had to clean up. She shuddered. On second thought, Colin totally deserves to read. "You have so much to look forward to, Alex." Isabel had no reason to lie, so Dean Sando's bad aim had just earned him an alibi. Dawes would be glad. And Alex supposed she was too. It was one thing to be a murderer, quite another to work for one. It was a long, late night in the kitchen, but Alex couldn't resent it. It felt like working toward something. Around 1 in the morning, they finished serving, tidied up the kitchen, packed bottles into the recycling bins, accepted air hisses from Bellbaum, and then floated into the night with platters of leftovers in hand. After the violence and strangeness of the last few days, it felt like a gift. It was a beautiful taste of what life might become, of how little the societies mattered to most people at Yale, of work that asked nothing of you but time and a bit of attention in a house full of harmless people high on nothing more than their own pretensions. Alex saw a gray in rollerblades ahead of her, weaving her way between the lampposts, drawing closer. Her skull and torso looked like they'd been crushed, a deep dimple left by the wheels of some careless driver's car. "Pasa punto, pasa mundo," Alex whispered, almost kindly, and watched the girl vanish. A moment passes, a world passes. Easy. Alex didn't have classes the next morning. She got up early to eat breakfast and to try to do a little reading before trekking up to Marsh, but as she was finishing her pile of eggs and hot sauce, she caught sight of the bridegroom. His expression turned disapproving when she followed up with a hot fudge sundae, but ice cream was available at all meals in every dining hall, and that was not an opportunity to be squandered. After breakfast, she ducked into the bathroom off the J common room and filled the sink. She wasn't eager to talk to him, she wasn't ready to discuss what she'd witnessed in his memories. But she also wanted to know if he'd had any luck finding Tara. After a moment, North's face appeared in the reflection. "Well," she said. "I haven't found her yet." Alex flicked the surface of the water with her finger and watched his reflection fracture. "Seems like you're not much good at this." When the water stilled, North's expression was grim. "And what have you discovered?" "You were right. Darlington was interested in your case. But his notes weren't in his desk at Il Bastone. I can look at Black Elm tomorrow night, when the new moon would rise. Maybe then Darlington would be able to answer the bridegroom's questions himself." And what? What did you see when you were in my head, Miss Stern?" "You were distressed when you cast me out." Alex contemplated how much she wanted to tell him. "What do you remember from the moment you died, North?" His face seemed to go still, and she realized she'd spoken his name out loud. "Damn it. Is that what you saw?" he asked slowly. "My death? Just answer me." "Nothing," he admitted. "One moment I was standing in my new office, talking to Daisy, and then I was no one. The mortal world was lost to me. You were on the other side." Alex could see how that could mess with your head. "Did you ever try to find Gladys Odenegg behind the veil?" "Who?" "Daisy's maid." North frowned. "The police interviewed her. She found our bodies, but she wasn't even there to witness the crime." "And she was just a maid," said Alex. "Guys like this never noticed the help." But North was right. Alex had spotted Gladys outside enjoying the spring weather herself. If Gladys had seen or heard something strange at the scene, she had every reason to share that information with the police. And Alex suspected there had been no one to see, just magic, invisible and wild, the frightened spirit of a man who had been brutalized by the Bonesmen and somehow found his way into North. "I'll let you know what I find at Black Elm. Quit following me around and go hunt down Tara." "What did you see in my head, Miss Stern?" "Sorry. You're breaking up." Alex released the plug in the drain. She headed out of the common room and texted Turner that she was on her way to the Marsh greenhouses. On her way, she placed a phone call to the hospital to ask after Michael Reyes. She should have checked in on the victim from Skull and Bones's latest prognostication sooner, but she'd been more than a little distracted. It took her a while to get the right person on the line, but eventually Jean Gatjula came on to tell her that Reyes was recovering well and would be sent home in the next 2 days. Alex's new home was Columbus House, a shelter far away from campus. She hoped Bones at least left him with a pocketful of cash for his trouble. The Marsh Botanical Garden sat at the top of Science Hill, the old mansion topped by what looked like a bell tower, the grounds of the former estate rolling down the slope toward the apartment Tara had shared with Lance. There was no real security and Alex blended in easily with the students coming and going from the facility. Four massive forestry school greenhouses stood near the back entrance, surrounded by a cluster of smaller glass structures. Alex had worried she wouldn't be able to identify where Tara had tended her dangerous garden, but as she made a circuit around the grounds, she detected the stink of the uncanny beneath the smells of manure and turned soil. Though the little greenhouse looked ordinary enough, Alex suspected it had the remnants of a glamour on it, probably courtesy of Kate Masters and manuscript. How else would Tara have cultivated her crops without inviting suspicion? But when Alex pulled open the door, she found nothing but empty planters and overturned pots on the tables. Someone had cleaned the place out. Kate? Colin? Someone else? Had Lance opened a portal from his jail cell and come here to destroy potential evidence? A single, slender tendril of some unknown plant lay in a pile of dirt beside a toppled plastic container. Alex touched her finger to it. The little vine unfurled, a lone white bud appearing from its leaves. Its petals parted in a burst of glittering seeds like a firework, with a soft but audible pooh, and it withered to nothing. Outside, Alex found a lean woman in jeans and a barn jacket digging through a bucket of some kind of mulch with gloved hands. "Hey," she said, "can you tell me who uses that greenhouse?" "Sveta Myers. She's a grad student." Alex didn't remember her name from Tara's case file. "You know where I can find her?" The woman shook her head. "She left a couple days ago. Took the rest of the semester off." Sveta Myers had gotten spooked. Maybe she'd done the work of destroying the greenhouse herself. "You ever see her with a couple?" "Skinny little blonde girl and a big guy, looked like he lived at the gym." "I saw the girl here a lot." "She was Sveta's cousin or niece or something?" Alex highly doubted that. "I might have seen the guy once or twice." "Why?" "Thanks for your help," said Alex, and headed for the gates. She tried to shake off her feeling of disappointment as she made her way back down the hill. She'd hoped to find more of Tara in the gardens, not just piles of dirt heaped like a fresh grave. Turner had said he'd meet Alex outside Ingalls Rink, and she spotted his Dodge idling by the curb. It was blessedly warm inside. "Anything?" he asked. She shook her head. Someone cleaned the whole place out, and the student they were working with skipped town too. Someone named Sveta Myers. Doesn't ring a bell, but I'll see if I can track her down. "I'll check the alumni rosters to see if she's connected to any of the societies," said Alex. "I want to talk to Lance Gressing." "You're back on that?" Alex had almost forgotten she'd feigned interest in talking to Gressing before. "Someone has to question him about the new information we have. If the case goes to trial, it will be too late. Someone sent a monster after me. They killed Tara, stole all her plants. Maybe they got to Sveta Myers too. They're cleaning house. Even if I could get an interview with Gressing, I'm not bringing you with me." "Why not?" "We need Gressing to believe we understand more about all of this than he does. It will take him about 30 seconds to realize you don't know your ass from a hot rock." What a colorful turn of phrase. "I saw you in that apartment, Turner. You almost wet yourself when Lance disappeared through that wall. You have a real way about you, you know that, Stern? Is it my charm or my looks that you can't get enough of?" Turner twisted in his seat to give her a long stare. "You don't always have to come out swinging. What are you so angry at?" Alex felt an irritating jolt of embarrassment. "Everything," she muttered, gazing at the fogged-up windshield. "Anyway, You know I'm right. Maybe so, but Lance is represented by counsel. Neither of us can talk to him without his lawyer. Would you like to? Of course I'd like to. I'd also like a rare steak and a moment of peace without you yapping in my ear. Can't oblige. But I think I can get you an interview with Gressing. Let's say that's true. Nothing we learn will be admissible in a court of law, stern. Lance Gressing could tell us he killed Tara 12 times over and we wouldn't be able to pin it on him. But we'll still get answers. Turner rested his gloved hands on the steering wheel. I'm pretty sure when my mother was talking about the devil, she had you in mind. I'm a delight. If I said yes, what would we need? Turner already had a nice enough suit. You own a briefcase? I can borrow one. Great. Then all we need is this. She pulled the mirror she'd used to gain access to Tara's apartment from her pocket. You want me to walk into a secure jail with a compact and a nice attaché case? It's worse than that, Turner. Alex flipped the mirror in her hand. I want you to believe in magic. 24. Winter. The plan was trickier than Alex had anticipated. The mirror would fool the guards they encountered, but not the cameras in the jail. Dawes came to the rescue with an actual tempest in a teapot. Alex hadn't thought Darlington was being literal when they'd walked through the bizarre basement of Rosenfeld Hall, but apparently back in their heyday, St. Elmo's had managed all kinds of interesting magic. It's not just the vessel, Dawes explained to Alex and Turner the next day, standing at the counter in the kitchen at Il Bastone, a golden teapot and jeweled strainer before her. It's the tea itself. She carefully measured out dried leaves from a tin stamped with the St. Elmo's crest, a sinister little design referred to as the Goat and Boat. Darlington said they're campaigning for a new tomb, Alex said. Dawes nodded. Losing Rosenfeld Hall broke them. They've been petitioning for years, claiming all sorts of new applications for their magic. But without a nexus to build over, there's no point to a new tomb. She poured the water over the leaves and set the timer on her phone. The lights flickered. Make the brew too strong, and you could short the grid for the entire eastern seaboard. Why are the tombs so important? Turner asked. This is just a house and you're standing there, working magic. He ran his tongue over his teeth, as if he didn't like the taste of the word. Lethe house magic is spell and object-based, borrowed enchantments, very stable. We don't rely on rites. It's why we can keep the wards up. The other societies are trafficking with far more powerful forces, telling the future, communicating with the dead, altering matter. Big magic, said Alex. Turner leaned back against the counter. So they have machine guns and you're working with a bow and arrow? Dawes looked up, startled. She rubbed her nose. Well, more like a crossbow, but yes. The timer sounded. Dawes swiftly removed the strainer and poured the tea into a thermos. She handed it to Alex. You should have about 2 hours of real disruption. After that, she shrugged. But you're not going to knock the power out, right? Turner asked. I don't want to be at a jail when all the lights go down. Ah, look how far you've come. Alex said. Now you're worried about magic being too powerful. Dawes tugged at her sweatshirt sleeves, the shorty she displayed while caught up in brewing the tea evaporating. Not if I got it right. Alex took the thermos and stowed it in her satchel, then yanked her hair into a tight bun. She'd told Mercy she had a job interview as an excuse to borrow her fancy black pantsuit. I hope you get the job, Mercy had said, and hugged Alex so tight it felt like her bones were bending. I hope I get it too, Alex had replied. She'd been happy to play dress up, happy to have this adventure to fill the hours, regardless of the danger. The new moon rite had felt distant, impossibly far off, but tonight it would happen. She was having trouble thinking about anything else. She checked her phone. No signal. Turner did the same. Me neither. Alex turned on the little television that sat above the breakfast nook. Nothing but static. A perfect brew, Dawes. Dawes looked pleased. Good luck. I'm about to commit career suicide, said Turner. Let's hope we've got more on our side than luck. The drive to the jail was short. No one there knew Alex, so she didn't have to worry about being recognized. She made a perfectly reasonable assistant in her borrowed corporate drag. Turner was another matter. He'd had to pop by the courthouse that morning to bump into Lance Gressing's attorney and secure his visage in the compact. They passed through security without incident. Stop looking at the cameras, Alex whispered as she and Turner were escorted down a dingy hallway lit by buzzing fluorescents. They look like they're working. The power is on, but they're just recording static, Alex said with more confidence than she felt. The thermos was tucked into her bag, its weight resting reassuringly against her hip. Once they were inside the meeting room, they'd be safe at least. There was no video or audio recording allowed in a conference between an attorney and his client. Lance was seated at the table when they entered. What do you want? He said when he caught sight of Turner, who had pocketed the compact after flashing it at the scowling guard. You've got 1 hour, the guard said. Don't push it. Gressing shoved back from the table, looking from Turner to Alex. What the fuck is this? Are you two working together? 1 hour, the guard repeated, and locked the door behind him. I know my rights, Gressing said, standing. He looked even bigger than he had at the apartment, and his bandaged hand didn't do much to put Alex at ease. She had made it her business not to get trapped in small spaces with men like Lance Gressing. You didn't want to be the only thing in sight when their moods went sour. Sit down, said Turner. We need to have a conversation. You can't talk to me without my lawyer. You walked through a wall yesterday, said Turner. That in the penal code? Lance looked almost sheepish at the accusation. He knows he's not supposed to be using portal magic, Alex thought. And he most definitely wasn't supposed to be seen doing it by a cop. Lance had no way of knowing that Turner was associated with the Houses of the Vale. Sit down, Gressing, Turner repeated. You might be glad you did. Alex wondered if Lance would just pop a mushroom in his mouth and vanish through the floor. But slowly, sullenly, he dropped back into his seat. Turner and Alex took chairs opposite him at the table. Lance's jaw set, and he jutted his chin toward Alex. Why were you at my place? My place. Not our place. She said nothing. I'm trying to find out who killed Tara, said Turner. Lance threw up his hands. If you know I'm innocent, why don't you get me out of this shithole? Innocent is a big word for what you are, Turner said in that same pleasant, condescending tone he'd used on Alex just a few days ago. Maybe you're innocent of this particular bit of brutality, and if that's the case it will be my great pleasure to make sure the murder charge against you is vacated. But right now what I want to convey to you is that no one knows we're here. The guards all think you're chatting with your lawyer, and what you need to absorb is that we can do whatever we want. Am I supposed to be afraid? Yes, said Turner. You are. But not of us. Hey, he can be afraid of us, said Alex. He can, but he has bigger problems to worry about. If you didn't kill Tara, then someone did. And that someone is just waiting to lay hands on you too. Right now you're a useful scapegoat. But for how long? Tara knew things she wasn't supposed to, and maybe you do too. I don't know shit. I'm not the one you need to convince. You've seen what these people can do. Do you think that they care about wiping away a little shit stain like you? Do you think they will hesitate to eradicate you or your friends, or that entire neighborhood, if it will help them sleep a little better at night? People like you and me don't matter, said Alex. Not when we stop being useful. Wait, said Alex. You wasted your only tab going back to your apartment? I thought I could get some cash, maybe make a run for it, or get something to trade in here, but your asshole cops had tore the whole place apart. Why didn't you just portal to the tomb, the table, and then go wherever you wanted? Lance blinked. Shit. He slumped back in his chair. Shit. He trained his gaze on Alex. He looked impossibly mournful. You're going to help me, right? You're going to protect me? Turner stood. Keep your head down, Gressang. As long as you look like you're taking the fall, you should be safe in here. Alex expected Lance to protest, try to bargain, maybe even threaten them. Instead, he just sat there, his big body frozen like a stone idol beneath the fluorescent lights. He didn't say a word when Turner knocked on the door and the guard came to fetch them, didn't look up when they left. He'd been to the jungles of the Amazon, explored the markets of Marrakesh. He'd seen into the mysteries of the world, but the mysteries of the world had taken no notice of him, and after all of it, he'd still ended up here. The doors had closed. The portals too. Lance Gressing wasn't going anywhere. Turner and Alex rode back to campus in silence, the Dodge's heater cranked up against the bitter cold. She texted Dawes to let her know they were in the clear and that she'd be at Black Elm by 8 at the latest, then slipped off the pumps she'd borrowed from Mercy. They were a half size too small, and her feet were killing her. It wasn't until they were exiting the highway that Turner said, "Well, I think we may have more motives than we started with. I'm not taking Gressing off the table. Not until we can put someone else at the scene. But Colin Cattry and Kate Masters are looking a lot more interesting." He tapped his gloved hands on the wheel. It's not only Colin and Kate, though, is it? It's all of them. All the little children in their robes and hoods, pretending they're wizards. They're not pretending. But Alex knew exactly what he meant. Colin was the most direct connection between Scroll and Key and Tara, but all of the locksmiths had shared their rituals with outsiders and hidden the truth from Lethe. If Tara had become a danger to the society, any one of them could have decided to shut her up. It also didn't seem likely Kate Masters had opted to go rogue from manuscript. Alex remembered what Mike Awolowo had said about the rarity of the drug. Maybe they'd all thought they could cut out their Shingon Mountain supplier and start growing their own. He'd seemed genuinely surprised that the Maraidi had gotten out, but that could have been an act. "Who do you like for this?" Turner asked. Alex tried not to show her surprise. Turner might just be using her as a sounding board, but it felt good to be asked. She wished she had a better answer. Alex flexed her aching feet. Any member of manuscript could have used a glamour to make Tara think she was meeting Lance. Plus, if Keyes relied on Tara for the secret sauce, why would they want her dead? Their magic has been a mess the last few years. They needed her. Unless she was pushing too hard, said Turner. We have no idea what her relationship with Colin was really like. We don't even know exactly what was in those tabs of hers. We aren't talking about magic mushrooms anymore. That was true. Maybe Colin the chemwiz hadn't liked being shown up by a town girl. And Alex doubted anyone in Scroll and Key liked being blackmailed into sharing their rights. It was also possible someone had cracked Tara's recipe and decided they didn't want her around anymore. Colin Cattry had an alibi that night, Alex said. He was at Belbaum's salon. You're telling me he couldn't just open up a convenient little portal, pop through, kill Tara, be back before anyone noticed? Alex wanted to smack herself. Smart, Turner. It's almost like I'm good at my job. Alex knew she should have thought of it herself. Maybe she would have if she wasn't too busy hoping Colin wasn't involved in the worst of this, that her perfect, promising summer with Belbom could remain untouched by the ugliness of Tara's murder. Turner steered the car up Chapel and pulled in at the Vanderbilt gates. She saw North hovering by the steps to her entryway. How long had he been waiting? And had he found Tara on the other side? With a shiver, she realized he'd been killed, or killed Pretty Daisy and himself, only blocks from where she was sitting. "What would you say if I told you there's a ghost outside my dorm?" asked Alex. "Right there in the courtyard?" "Honestly?" asked Turner. "After everything I've seen the last few days?" "Yeah. I'd still think you were screwing with me. What if I told you he's working our case?" Turner's real laugh was completely unlike his false chuckle, a deep, full-belly laugh. "I've had weirder sea ice." Alex shoved her feet into the two tight pumps and pushed open the car door. The night air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and the sky was black above her. New moon rising. She was due at Black Elm in a matter of hours. When Dean Sando had first started talking about the ritual, Alex assumed they would try to contact Darlington from Isle Bastone, maybe even using the crucible. But Sando really did intend to call him home. "I'll shake Kate Masters' tree tomorrow," said Turner. "Colin Catree too. See what falls out. Thanks for the ride-along." Alex shut the car door and watched Turner's headlights recede down Chapel. She wondered if she'd ever get to speak to the detective again. Everything might change tonight. Alex had longed for Darlington's return, and she'd feared it, and she couldn't quite pull apart those feelings. She knew that when he told Dean Sando what she'd done, what she really was, it would mean the end for her and Lethe. She knew that. But she also knew that Darlington was Tara's best chance at justice. He spoke the language of this world, understood its protocols. He would make the connections that the rest of them were missing. She could admit she missed his pompous, know-it-all ass. But it was more than that. He would protect her. The thought was embarrassing. Alex the survivor, Alex the rattler, should be harder than that. But she was tired of fighting. Darlington wouldn't stand for any of what she and Dawes had been put through. He might not believe she belonged in Lethe, but she knew he believed she was worthy of Lethe's protection. He had promised to place himself between her. Between all of them, and the terrible dark. That meant something. North kept his distance, hovering in the golden light of the street lamp, murderer or victim, but partner either way. For now. She nodded to him and left it at that. Tonight she had other debts to pay. 25. Winter. "How'd it go?" Mercy asked, as soon as Alex entered the common room. She sat cross-legged on the couch, surrounded by books. It took Alex a moment to remember she was supposed to have been on a job interview. "I'm not sure," she said, heading back to their bedroom to change. "Maybe good?" "It was interesting. These pants are too tight. Your ass is too big." "My ass is just right," Alex called back. She pulled on black jeans, one of the last of her good long-sleeved shirts, and a black sweater. She considered making up an excuse about a study group, then opted for brushing her hair and applying some dark plum lipstick. "Where are you going?" Mercy asked when she caught sight of Alex's look. "I'm meeting someone for coffee." "Hold up," said Lauren, poking her head out of her bedroom. "Is Alex Stern going on a date?" "First Alex Stern had a job interview," said Mercy. "And now she's going on a date." "Who are you, Alex Stern?" "Hell if I know." "If y'all are done, who stole my hoops?" "What college is he in?" asked Lauren. "He's town." "Ooh," said Lauren. She placed Alex's fake silver hoops in her hand. "Alex loves a working man. That lipstick is way too much." "I like it," said Mercy. "It looks like she's going to try to eat his heart." Alex stuck the hoops in her ears and blotted her lips with a tissue. Just right. February Club is almost over, said Mercy. Every night in February, some group or organization hosted an event, a protest against the deep gloom of winter. We should hit the last party on Friday. Should we? Alex asked, wondering if Mercy was really ready for that. Yeah, said Mercy. I'm not saying we should stay long or anything. But I want to go. Maybe I'll borrow your lipstick. Alex grinned and took out her phone to request a ride. Then we're definitely going. If I'm still a Yale student tomorrow. Don't wait up, Ma. You beautiful slut, said Lauren. Be careful, said Mercy. Tell him to be careful, said Alex, and locked the door behind her. She had the driver drop her off at the stone columns of black elm and walked up the long driveway on foot. The garage was open, and Alex could see Darlington's burgundy Mercedes parked inside. Lights shone from the first and second stories of the house, and Alex saw Dawes through the kitchen window, stirring something on the stove. As soon as she entered, she recognized the lemony smell. Avgo Limono. Darlington's favorite. You're early, said Dawes over her shoulder. You look nice. Thanks, Alex said, feeling suddenly shy. Had the earrings and the lipstick been her version of lemon soup? Alex stripped off her coat and hung it on a hook by the door. She wasn't sure what to expect from the night, but she wanted a chance to search Darlington's office and bedroom before the others arrived. She was glad Dawes had turned all the lights on. The last time she'd been here, the loneliness of the place had overwhelmed her. Alex checked the office first, a room of wood paneling and packed bookshelves located just off of the pretty sunroom where she'd written her report for Sando on Tara's death. The desk was fairly well organized, but its file cabinets just seemed to be full of documents pertaining to Black Elm. In the top drawer, Alex found an old-fashioned datebook and a crushed pack of Chesterfields. She couldn't imagine Darlington taking a drag on a bargain smoke. Her search through his monk's chamber on the third floor was equally fruitless. Cosmo followed her inside and stared at her judgmentally as she pulled open drawers and thumbed through stacks of books. Yes, I'm violating his privacy, Cosmo, she said. But it's for a good cause. Apparently that was enough for the cat, who twined through Alex's legs, pressing his head against her combat boots and purring loudly. She gave him a scratch between the ears as she flipped through the books piled closest to Darlington's bed, all of them devoted to New England industry. She paused on what looked like an old carriage catalog, the paper yellowing and torn at the edges, sealed in a plastic baggie to protect it from the elements. North's family had been carriage makers. Alex removed it carefully from the bag. On closer inspection, it seemed to be a kind of newsy trade magazine for the various carriage makers in New Haven and the businesses that supported them. There were hand-drawn pictures of wheels and locking mechanisms and lanterns and, on the third page, an announcement in large bold type of the construction of North & Son's brand new factory, which would be fronted by a showroom for prospective buyers. In the margin, in Darlington's distinctive scrawl, was a note that read, "The first? That's it? Come on, Darlington." The first what? Alex heard the sound of tires on gravel and looked down to the driveway to see headlights from two cars, a slightly beat-up Audi and, close behind it, a shiny blue Land Rover. The Audi pulled into the garage beside Darlington's Mercedes, and a moment later Alex saw Dean Sando and a woman who had to be Michelle Alamedin emerge. Alex wasn't sure what she'd expected, but the girl looked perfectly ordinary. Thick curls in a tangle around her shoulders, an angular face with elegantly manicured brows. She wore a well-cut black coat and knee-high black boots. She looked very New York to Alex, though Alex had never been to New York. Alex slipped the carriage catalog back in its bag and hurried downstairs. Sando and Michelle were already hanging up their coats in the mudroom, trailed by an older woman and a gawky-looking boy with a mohawk and a huge backpack slung over his shoulders. It took Alex a long minute to recognize them out of their white robes, but then the memory locked into place. Josh Zielinski, the president of the Aurelian delegation, and the alumna who had led the ritual last fall with that novelist that had almost gone so wrong. Amelia. Darlington had convinced Aurelian the fault had been theirs and not Alex's. And on that same night, much to Dawes's confusion, Alex and Darlington had gotten very drunk on expensive red wine and smashed a cupboardful of innocent crystal to bits, along with a tacky set of china chafing dishes that had probably deserved to die. She remembered standing in a room full of broken glass and crockery shards, feeling better than she had in years. Darlington had surveyed the damage, topped off his glass, and blearily said, "There's a metaphor in this, Stern. I'll figure it out when I'm sober." Now introductions were made and Sando opened a bottle of wine. Dawes set out a plate of cheese and sliced vegetables. It felt like the prelude to a bad dinner party. "So," Michelle said, popping a slice of cucumber into her mouth. "Danny got himself disappeared?" "He could be dead," Dawes said quietly. "I doubt it," Michelle replied. "Or he'd be haunting the hell out of her." She hooked her thumb at Alex. "You were with him, right?" Alex nodded, feeling her stomach clench. "And you're the magic girl who can see grays. Has he been hanging around?" "No," said Alex. And North hadn't seen him on the other side. Darlington was alive somewhere, and he was coming home tonight. "Such an extraordinary gift," Amelia said. She had thick honey-brown hair that fell just below her chin and wore a navy twinset over starched jeans. "Leigh is lucky to have you." "Yes," said Sando kindly. "We are." Josh Zielinski shook his head. "Crazy. They're just all floating around? Are there any grays here right now?" Alex took a long sip of her wine. "Yup. One has his hand on your ass." Zielinski whirled. Sando looked pained. But Michelle laughed. "Darlington must have been pissing himself when he found out what you can do." Sando cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," he said. "All of you. This is a difficult situation, and I know you're all busy." "It's not a fucking board meeting," Alex wanted to shout. He disappeared. Michelle refilled her wine glass. "I can't say I was surprised to get the call." "No. I feel like I spent most of Darlington's freshman year making sure he didn't kill himself or set something on fire. Wherever he is, he's probably thrilled things finally got exciting around here." Sando chuckled. "I'll wager." Alex felt a stab of irritation. She didn't like Sando and Michelle sharing a smile over Darlington. He deserved better. "He's a sensation seeker?" asked Amelia, sounding a little thrilled herself. "Not exactly," said Michelle. "He's just always ready to jump in. He fancied himself a knight, a boy standing at the door to the underworld with a sword in his hand." Alex had scoffed whenever Darlington described himself or Leigh that way. But it didn't feel silly now, not when she thought of Tara, of drugs like Meridy, boys like Blake. The Houses of the Vale had too much power, and the rules they had put in place were really about controlling access to that power, not limiting the damage it could do. "Isn't that kind of what we are?" Alex said before she could stop herself. "We are the shepherds and all that?" Michelle laughed again. "Don't tell me he got to you too?" She looped her arm through Sando's as they strolled out of the kitchen, followed by Zielinski and Amelia. "I wish I'd been able to come earlier and see this place in the daylight. He did so much work to it." Dawes's hand brushed against Alex's, startling her. It was a little thing, but Alex let her knuckles do the same. Darlington had been right about the need for Leigh, about why they were here. They weren't just mall cops keeping a bunch of unruly kids in line. They were supposed to be detectives, soldiers. Michelle and Sando didn't get it. Do I? Alex wondered. How had she gone from barely getting by to holy warrior? And what was going to happen when they pulled Darlington back to their world from wherever he'd been cooling his heels? Maybe her work on the Tara Hutchins case would be a mark in her favor, but she very much doubted he was just going to say, "Way to take the initiative, all is forgiven." She would tell him she was sorry, that she hadn't known what hell lie intended that morning at Ground Zero. She would tell him whatever she had to and hold on to this life with both hands. Where do we think he is? Michelle was asking as they took the stairs up to the second floor. We don't know. I thought we'd use a hound dog casting. Sando sounded almost pleased with himself. Alex sometimes forgot that the dean had actually been in Lethe, and had been pretty good at it too. Very nice. What are we using for his scent? The deed to Black Elm. Was it bound by Aurelian? Not that I know of, said Amelia. But we can activate the language to summon the signatories. From anywhere? Asked Michelle. From anywhere, Zielinski said smugly. They went through a long description of the mechanics of the contract, and how the summoning should work so long as the commitment to the contract was made in good faith, and the parties had some emotional connection to the agreement. Alex and Dawes exchanged a glance. That much at least they could be sure of, Darlington loved Black Elm. The second-floor ballroom had been lit with lanterns at the 4 compass points. Darlington's exercise mats and gear had been set off to the side. This is a good space, said Zielinski, unzipping his backpack. He and Amelia drew out 4 objects wrapped in cotton batting. We don't need someone to open a portal? Alex whispered to Dawes, watching Josh unwrap the cotton to reveal a large silver bell. If Sando is right and Darlington is just stuck between worlds or in some kind of pocket space, then the activation of the deed should create enough pull to bring him through to us. And if it isn't? Then we'll have to get Scroll and Key involved at the next new moon. But what if the locksmiths had been the ones to create the portal in the basement that night? What if they wanted Darlington to stay gone? Alex, called Sando, please come help me make the marks. Alex felt strange warding the circle, as if she'd somehow fallen backward through time and become Sando's Dante. We'll leave the northern gate open, he said. True north to guide him home. I'll need you to be on the lookout for greys on your own. I would take Hiram's elixir, but I'm at an age when the risk is just too high. He sounded embarrassed. I can handle it, said Alex. Is there blood involved? She at least wanted to be ready if a flood of greys came on. No, said Sando. No blood. And Darlington planted the Black Elm borders with protective species. But you know strong desire can draw greys, and strong desire is what we need to bring him back. Alex nodded and took her position at the northern compass point. Sando took the southern point. Dawes and Michelle Alamedin faced each other at east and west. With only the candlelight to give shape to the space, the ballroom felt even more vast. It was a big, cold room, built to impress people long since gone. Amelia and Josh stood at the center of the circle with a sheaf of papers, the deed to Black Elm, but they would have nothing to do unless Sando's casting worked. Are we ready? He asked. When no one answered, Sando forged ahead, murmuring first in English, then in Spanish, then in a whispery language that Alex recognized as Dutch. Was that Portuguese next? Mandarin followed. She realized he was speaking the languages that Darlington knew. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination or if she really did hear the patter of paws, panting. A hound dog casting. She thought of the hounds of Lethe, the surprisingly beautiful jackals Darlington had set on her that first day at Il Bastone. I forgive you, she thought. Just come home. She heard a sudden howl, and then the very distant sound of barking. The candles flared, their flames gone vibrant green. "We've found him," cried Sando in a trembling voice. He sounded almost frightened. "Activate the deed." Amelia touched a candle to the papers lying at the center of the circle. Green light kindled and rose around the piles. She tossed something into the flame and it ignited in bright sparks like a firework. Iron, Alex realized. She'd seen an experiment just like that in a science class once. Words seemed to hover in the green flame over the document as the iron filings sparked. "Witnesseth that the said grantor. For good and valuable consideration. For good for good." The words curled in on themselves, rising in the fire and vanishing like smoke. The candle flames shot even higher, then sputtered. The fire covering the deed banked abruptly. They were left in darkness. And then Black Elm came alive. All at once, the sconces on the walls flared to brightness, music blared from the speakers in the corner, and the halls echoed with the sound of a late-night newscast as somewhere in the house a television came on. "Who the hell left all the lights on?" said an old man standing outside the circle. He was frighteningly thin, his hair a wisp on his head, his bathrobe hanging open to reveal an emaciated chest and shriveled genitals. A cigarette hung from his mouth. He wasn't sharp and clear the way Greys usually were to Alex. He looked, well, gray. As if she were viewing him through layers of milky chiffon. The veil. She knew she was looking at Daniel Tabor Arlington III. A moment later he was gone. "It's working," shouted Josh. "Use the bells," cried Amelia. "Call him home." Alex lifted the silver bell at her feet and saw the others do the same. They rang the bells, the sweet sound rolling over the circle, over the din of the music and the chaos of the house. The windows blew open. Alex heard a squeal of tires and a loud crash from somewhere below. Around her, she saw people dancing. A young man with a heavy mustache who distinctly resembled Darlington floated past, dressed in a suit that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Stop," shouted Sando. "Something's wrong. Stop the ringing." Alex seized the clapper of her bell, trying to silence it, and saw the others do the same. But the bells did not stop ringing. She could feel her bell still vibrating in her hand as if struck, hear the peals growing louder. Alex's cheeks felt flushed. The room had been icy moments before, but now she was sweating in her clothes. The stink of sulfur filled the air. She heard a groan that seemed to rumble through the floor, a deep bass rattle. She remembered the crocodiles calling to each other from the banks of the river in the borderlands. Whatever was out there, whatever had entered the room, was bigger. Much, much bigger. It sounded hungry. The bells were screaming. They sounded like an angry crowd, a mob about to do violence. Alex could feel the vibrations making her palms buzz. Boom. The building shook. Boom. Amelia lost her footing, clutched at Zelinsky to keep her balance, the bell tumbling from her hands, still ringing and ringing. Boom. The same sound Alex had heard that night at the prognostication, the sound of something trying to break through the circle, to break through to their world. That night the Greys in the operating theater had pierced the veil, splintered the railing. She'd thought they were trying to destroy the protection of the circle, but what if they were trying to get inside it? What if they were afraid of whatever was coming? That low rumbling groan shook the room again. It sounded like the jaws of something ancient creaking open. Alex gagged, then retched, the scent of sulfur so heavy she could taste it, rotten in her mouth. Murder. A voice, hard and loud, above the bells, Darlington's voice, but deeper, snarling. Angry. Murder, he said. Well, shit. So much for him keeping his mouth shut. And then she saw it, looming over the circle, as if there were no ceiling, no third story, No house at all, a monster, there was no other word for it, horned and heavy-toothed, so big its hulking body blotted out the night sky. A boar. A ram. The rearing, segmented body of a scorpion. Her mind leapt from terror to terror, unable to make sense of it. Alex realized she was screaming. Everyone was screaming. The walls seemed lit by fire. Alex could feel the heat on her cheeks, searing the hair on her arms. Sando strode forward to the center of the circle. He tossed down his bell and roared, "Lapidea est lingua vestra." He threw his arms open as if conducting an orchestra, his face made golden in the flames. He looked young. He looked like a stranger. Silentium domus vacui audito. Nemo gratis expiator. The windows of the ballroom blew inward, glass shattering. Alex fell to her knees, covering her head with her hands. She waited, heart pounding in her chest. Only then did she realize the bells had stopped ringing. The silence was soft against her ears. When Alex opened her eyes, she saw that the candles had bloomed to light again, bathing everything in a gentle glow. As if nothing had happened, as if it had all been a grand illusion, except for the pebbles of broken glass littering the floor. Amelia and Josh were both on their knees, sobbing. Dawes was huddled on the floor with her hands clasped over her mouth. Michelle Alamedin paced back and forth, muttering, "Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit." Wind gusted through the shattered windows, the smell of the night air cold and sweet after the thick tang of sulfur. Sando stood staring up at where the beast had been. His dress shirt was soaked through with sweat. Alex forced herself to stand and make her way to Dawes, boots crunching over glass. "Dawes," she said, crouching down and laying a hand on her shoulder. "Hammy?" Dawes was crying, the tears making slow, silent tracks down her cheeks. "He's gone," she said. "He's really gone." "But I heard him," Alex said. "Or something that sounded very much like him." "You don't understand," Dawes said. "That thing. It was a hell beast," said Michelle. "It was talking with his voice. That means it consumed him. Someone let it into our world. Left it like a cave for him to walk into." "Who?" said Dawes, wiping the tears from her face. "How?" Sando put his arm around her. "I don't know. But we're going to find out." "But if he's dead, then he should be on the other side," said Alex. "He isn't. He's gone, Alex," Michelle said. Her voice was harsh. "He's not on the other side. He's not behind the veil. He was devoured, soul and all. It's not a portal." That was what Darlington had said that night in the Rosenfeld basement. And now she knew what he had meant to say, what he had tried to say, before that thing had taken him. "It's not a portal. It's a mouth." Darlington had not disappeared. He had been eaten. "No one survives that," said Sando. His voice was hoarse. He took off his glasses and Alex saw him wipe at his eyes. "No soul can endure it. We summoned a poltergeist, an echo. That's all." "He's gone," Dawes said again. This time Alex didn't deny it. They collected Aurelian's bells and Dean Sando said he would make calls to have the windows of the ballroom boarded up the next morning. It was starting to snow, but it was too late in the evening to do anything about it now. And who was there left to care? Black Elm's keeper, its defender, would never return. They made their slow way out of the house. When they entered the kitchen, Dawes began to cry harder. It all looked so impossibly stupid and hopeful, the half-full glasses of wine, the tidily arranged vegetables, the pot of soup waiting on the stove. Outside, they found Darlington's Mercedes smashed into Amelia's Land Rover. That was the crash Alex had heard, Darlington's car possessed by whatever echo they'd drawn into this world. Sando sighed. I'll call a tow truck and wait with you, Amelia. Michelle. I can take a car to the station. I'm sorry, It's fine, she said. She seemed distracted, confused, as if she couldn't quite make the numbers tally, as if she'd only now realized that, in all her years at Lethe, she'd been walking side by side with death. Alex, can you see Dawes home? Sando asked. Dawes wiped her sleeve across her tear-stained face. I don't want to go home. To Il Bastone, then. I'll join you as soon as I can. He trailed off. I don't know exactly what we'll do. Sure, said Alex. She used her phone to request a ride, then put her arm around Dawes and herded her down the driveway after Michelle. They stood in silence by the stone columns, black elm behind them, the snow gathering around them. Michelle's car came first. She didn't offer to share it, but she turned to Alex as she got in. I work in gifts and acquisitions in the Butler Library at Columbia, she said. If you need me. Before Alex could reply, she ducked inside. The car vanished slowly down the street, cautious in the snow, its red tail lights dwindling to sparks. Alex kept her arm around Dawes, afraid that she might pull away. Until this moment, until this night, anything had been possible, and Alex had really believed that somehow, inevitably, maybe not on this new moon but on the next, Darlington would return. Now the spell of hope was broken and no amount of magic could make it whole. The golden boy of Lethe was gone. 26. Winter. You'll stay, won't you? Dawes asked as they entered the foyer at Il Bastone. The house sighed around them, as if sensing their sadness. Did it know? Had it known from the start that Darlington would never come back? Of course. She was grateful Dawes wanted her there. She didn't want to be alone, or to try to put on a cheerful face for her roommates. She couldn't pretend right now. And yet she couldn't stop reaching for some scrap of hope. Maybe we got it wrong. Maybe Sando screwed up. Dawes switched on the lights. He's had almost 3 months to plan. It was a good ritual. Well, maybe he got it wrong on purpose. Maybe he doesn't want Darlington back. She knew she was grasping at smoke, but it was all she had. If he's involved in covering up Tara's murder, you think he really wants a crusader like Darlington around instead of me? But you are a crusader, Alex. A more competent crusader. What did Sando say to stop the ritual? Your tongues are made stone. He used that to silence the bells. And the rest? Dawes shucked off her scarf and hung her parka on the hook. She kept her back to Alex when she said, "Hear the silence of an empty home. No one will be made welcome." The thought of Darlington being forever banned from Black Elm was horrible. Alex rubbed her tired eyes. The night of the skull and bones prognostication, I heard something, pounding on the door to get in right at the moment Tara was murdered. It sounded just like tonight. Maybe it was Darlington. Maybe he saw what was happening to Tara, and he tried to warn me. If he... Dawes was already shaking her head, her loose bun unwinding at her neck. You heard what they said. That thing ate him. Her shoulders shook and Alex realized she was crying again, clutching her hanging coat as if without its support she might topple. He's gone. The words like a refrain, a song they'd be singing until the grief had passed. Alex touched a hand to Dawes's arm. Dawes. But Dawes stood up straight, sniffled deeply, wiped the tears from her eyes. Sando was wrong, though. Technically. Someone could survive being consumed by a hell beast. Just no one human. What could, then? A demon. Far above our pay grade. Dawes took a long, shuddering breath and pushed her hair back from her face, refastening her bun. Do you think Sando will want coffee when he gets here? She asked as she retrieved her headphones from the parlor carpet. I want to work for a while. How's it going? The dissertation? Dawes blinked slowly, looked down at the headphones in her hand as if wondering how they'd gotten there. I have no idea. I'll order pizza, said Alex. And I'm taking first shower. We both reek. I'll open a bottle of wine. Alex was halfway up the stairs when she heard the knock at the door. For a second, she thought it might be Dean Sando. But why would he knock? In the 6 months she'd been a part of Lethe, no one had knocked at Orange. Dawes, she began. Let me in. A male voice, loud and angry through the door. Alex's feet had carried her all the way to the base of the stairs before she realized it. Compulsion. Dawes, don't, she cried. But Dawes was already unlocking the door. The lock clicked and the door slammed inward. Dawes was thrown back against the banister, headphones flying from her hand. Alex heard a loud crack as her head connected with the wood. Alex didn't stop to think. She snatched up Dawes's headphones and shoved them down over her ears, using her hands to keep them tight to her head as she ran up the stairs. She glanced back once and saw Blake Keeley, beautiful Blake Keeley, the shoulders of his wool coat dusted with snow as if he'd emerged from the pages of a catalogue, step over Dawes's body, his eyes locked on Alex. Dawes will be okay, she told herself. She has to be okay. You can't help her if you lose control. Blake was using star power or something like it. Alex had felt the pull of it in his voice through the door. It was the only reason Dawes had flipped the lock. She bolted toward the armory, punching Turner's number into her phone, and slammed her hand against the old stereo panel on the wall by the library, hoping that for once it would oblige. Maybe the house was fighting alongside her, because music boomed through the hallways, louder and clearer than she'd ever heard it before. When Darlington had been around, it would have been Purcell or Prokofiev. Instead, it was the last thing Dawes had listened to. If Alex hadn't been so frightened, she would have laughed as Morrissey's warble and the jangle of guitars filled the air. The words were muted by the headphones, the sound of her own breathing loud in her ears. She hurtled into the armory, throwing open drawers. Dawes was down and bleeding. Turner was far away. And Alex didn't want to think about what Blake might do to her, what he might make her do. Would it be revenge for what she'd done? Had he figured out who she was and somehow followed her here? Or was it Tara who had brought him to her door? Alex had been so focused on the societies, she hadn't noticed another suspect right in front of her, a pretty boy with a rotten core who didn't like the word no. She needed a weapon, but nothing in the armory was made to fight a living, human body hyped up on super charisma. Alex glanced over her shoulder. Blake was right behind her. He was saying something, but thankfully she couldn't hear him over the music. She reached into the drawers, grabbing anything heavy she could find to throw. She wasn't even sure what priceless thing she was hurling at him. An astrolabe. A glittering paperweight with a sea frozen inside it. Blake batted them aside and seized the back of her neck. He was strong from lacrosse and vanity. He tore the headphones from her ears. Alex screamed as loud as she could and raked her nails across his face. Blake shrieked and she fled down the hall. She'd fought monsters before. She'd won. But not on her own. She needed to get outside, away from the wards, where she could draw on North's strength or find another Grey to help her. The house seemed to be humming, buzzing its anxiety. A stranger is here. A killer is here. The lights crackled and flared, the static from the stereo rising. Calm down, Alex told the house as she pounded down the hallway, back to the stairs. You're too old for this shit. But the house continued to whir and rattle. Blake tackled her from behind. She hit the floor hard. Be still, he crooned in her ear. Alex felt her limbs lock up. She didn't just stop moving, she was glad to do it, thrilled, really. She would be perfectly still, still as a statue. Dawes, she screamed. Be quiet, said Blake. Alex clamped her lips shut. She was happy to have the chance to do this for him. He deserved it. He deserved everything. Blake rolled her over and stood, towering over her. He seemed impossibly tall, his golden, tousled head framed by the coffered ceiling. You ruined my life, he said. He lifted his foot and rested his boot on her chest. You ruined me. Some part of her mind screamed, run. Push him off. Do something. But it was a distant voice, lost to the contented hum of submission. She was so happy, so very happy to oblige. Blake pressed down with his boot and Alex felt her ribs bend. He was big, 200 pounds of muscle, and all of it felt like it was resting just beneath her heart. The house rattled hysterically, as if it could feel her bones crying out. Alex heard a table topple somewhere, dishes crashing from their shelves. Il Baston, giving voice to her fear. What gave you the right, he said. Answer me. He'd granted her permission. Mercy and every girl before her, Alex spat, even as her mind begged for another command, another way to please him. They gave me the right. Blake lifted his boot and brought it down hard. Alex screamed as pain exploded through her. At the same moment the lights went out. The stereo went with it, the music fading, leaving them in darkness, in silence, as if Il Baston had simply died around her. In the quiet, she heard Blake crying. His left hand was clenched in a fist, as if readying to strike her. But the light from the street lamps filtering in through the windows caught on something silver in his other hand. A blade. Can you be quiet? He asked. Tell me you can be quiet. I can be quiet, said Alex. Blake giggled, that high-pitched giggle she remembered from the video. That's what Tara said too. What did she say? Alex whispered. What did she do to make you mad? Blake leaned down. His face was still beautiful, cut in sharp, almost angelic lines. She thought she was better than all my other girls. But everyone gets the same from Blake. Had he been stupid enough to use the Meridian on Tara? Had she realized what he was using it for? Had she threatened him? Did any of it matter now? Alex was going to die. In the end, she'd been no smarter than Tara, no more able to protect herself. Alex? Dean Sando's voice from somewhere down below. Don't come up here, she screamed. Call the cops. He has, shut the fuck up. Blake drew back his foot and kicked her hard in the side. Alex went silent. It was too late anyway. Sando was at the top of the stairs, his expression bewildered. From her place on the floor, Alex saw him register her on her back, Blake above her, the knife in his hand. Sando lunged forward, but he was too slow. Stop, snapped Blake. The dean went rigid, nearly toppling. Blake turned to Alex, a smile spreading across his lips. He a friend of yours? Should I make him throw himself down the stairs? Alex was silent. He'd told her to be silent and she just wanted to make him happy, but her mind was mule-kicking around her skull. They were all going to die tonight. Come here, Blake said. Sando strode forward eagerly, a spring in his step. Blake bobbed his head at Alex. I want you to do me a favor. Whatever I can do to help, said Sando, as if inviting a promising new student to office hours. Blake held out the knife. Stab her. Stab her in the heart. A pleasure. Sando took the knife and straddled Alex. A cold wind gusted through the house from the open door. Alex felt it on her flushed face. She couldn't speak, couldn't fight, couldn't run. Behind Sando the top of the open door and the brick path were visible. Alex remembered the first day Darlington had brought her here. She remembered Darlington's whistle. She remembered the jackals, spirit hounds, bound to serve the delegates of Lethe. We are the shepherds. Alex's hand lay against the floorboards. She could feel the cool, polished wood beneath her palm. Please, she begged the house silently. I am a daughter of Lethe, and the wolf is at the door. Sando raised the knife high above his head. Alex parted her lips. She wasn't speaking, no, she wasn't talking, and desperately, hopelessly, she whistled. Send me my hounds. The jackals burst through the front door in a snapping, snarling pack. They raced up the stairs, claws clattering and paws sliding. Too late. Do it, said Blake. Sando brought the knife down. Something slammed into him, driving him off Alex. The hallway was suddenly full of jackals, trampling over her in a snarling mass. One of them crashed into Blake. The weight of their bodies drove the breath from Alex's lungs, and she cried out as their paws smacked over her broken bones. They were wild with excitement and bloodlust, yelping and snapping. Alex had no idea how to control them. She'd never had reason to ask. They were a mess of gleaming canines and black gums, muzzles frothing. She tried to push up, push away. She felt jaws clamp closed on her side and screamed as long teeth sank into her flesh. Sando shouted a string of words she didn't understand and Alex felt the jaws open, hot blood gushing from her. Her vision was turning black. The jackals retreated, slinking back toward the stairs, bodies bumping against each other. They crouched by the banister, whining softly, jaws snapping at the air. Sando lay bleeding on the hall runner beside her, his pant leg was torn. She could see that the jackal's jaws had snapped clean through his femur, the white jut of bone gleaming like a pale tuber. Blood was gouting from his leg. He was gasping, fumbling in his pocket, trying to find his phone, but his movements were slow, sluggish. Dean Sando, she panted. His head lolled on his shoulders. She saw the phone slip from his fingers and fall to the carpet. Blake was crawling toward her. He was bleeding too. She saw where the jackals had sunk their teeth into the meat of his biceps, his thigh. He pulled himself up the length of her body, resting against her like a lover. His hand was still clenched in a fist. He struck her once, twice. The other hand slid into her hair. Eat shit, he whispered against her cheek. He sat up, gripped her hair in his hand, and slammed her skull against the floor. Stars exploded behind her eyes. He lifted her head again, yanking on her hair, tilting her chin back. Eat shit and die. Alex heard a wet, heavy thud and wondered if her skull had split open. Then Blake fell forward onto her. She shoved at him, scrabbling against his chest, his weight impossible, and finally rolled him off her. She touched her hand to the back of her head. No blood. No wound. She couldn't say the same for Blake. One side of his perfect face was a bloody red crater. His head had been smashed in. Dawes stood over him, weeping. In her hands she clutched the marble bust of Hiram Bingham III, patron saint of Lethe, his stern profile covered with blood and bits of bone. Dawes let the bust slip from her fingers. It hit the carpet and rolled to its side. She turned away from Alex, fell to her knees, and vomited. Blake Keeley stared at the ceiling, eyes unseeing. The snow had melted on his jacket, and the wool glittered like something far finer. He looked like a fallen prince. The jackals padded down the stairs, vanishing through the open door. Alex wondered where they went, what they spent their hours hunting. Somewhere in the distance she heard what might have been a siren or some lost thing howling in the dark. 20. Winter. What had Alex been thinking the night that Darlington vanished? That she just had to get him back to the hutch. They would talk. She would explain. What exactly? That they deserved it? That killing Len and the others had given not only Leigh, but her some kind of peace? That the world punished girls like them, like Tara, for all their bad choices, every mistake. That she had liked doling out the punishment herself. That whatever conscience she'd always assumed she possessed just hadn't shown up for work that day. And she certainly wasn't sorry. But she could say she was. She could pretend she didn't remember the feel of the bat in her hand, that she wouldn't do it again. Because that's what Darlington feared, not that she was bad, but that she was dangerous. He feared chaos. So Alex could tell him that Leigh had possessed her. She would turn it into a mystery that they could solve together. He would like that. She would be something for him to fix, a project like his broken town, his crumbling house. She could still be one of the good guys. But Alex never had to tell those lies. The thing in the basement made sure of that. Darlington was not abroad. He was not in Spain. And she didn't really believe he'd vanished into some pocket realm to be retrieved like a child who'd wandered away from the group. Dawes and Dean Sando hadn't been there that night. They hadn't felt the finality of that darkness. It's not a portal, he'd said in the basement of Rosenfeld Hall. It's a ma. 1 minute he was there and the next he was enveloped in blackness. She'd seen the terror in his eyes, the plea. Do something. Help me. She meant to. At least, she thought she meant to. She'd replayed that moment 1,000 times, wondering why she'd frozen, if it had been fear or lack of training or distraction. Or if it had been a choice. If the thing in the corner had given her a solution to the problem Darlington presented. This isn't something I can keep from Sando. Darlington's words like fingers reaching into her mouth, pinching her tongue, keeping her from crying out. At night, she thought of Darlington's perfect face, of the feel of his body bracketing hers in the sleep-warmed sheets of his narrow bed. I let you die. To save myself, I let you die. That is the danger in keeping company with survivors. The mechanic leaned over her, smiling. Nowhere to run, bitch. His grip felt so heavy on her neck, like his thumbs might push right through her skin and sink into her windpipe. Alex hadn't wanted to think of that night at Ground Zero. She hadn't wanted to look back. She hadn't even been sure what had happened, if it had been Leigh or her that had made it possible. Let me in. Stay with me. Maybe she'd been afraid that if she opened the door again something terrible might step inside. But that was exactly what she needed now. Something terrible. Alex's right hand closed over the discarded golf club, a putter. She extended her left hand toward north, remembered the sense of herself splitting, willed herself to do it again. Open the door, Alex. She had time to register the look of surprise on his face, and then the dark cold of him rushed toward her. Leigh had come to her willingly, but North fought. She sensed his confusion, his desperate terror to remain free, and then a tide of her own need swallowed his concerns. North felt different than Leigh. She had been the powerful curve of a wave. North's strength was dark and limber, springy as a fencer's foil. It filled her limbs, made her feel like molten metal ran through her veins. She twirled the putter once in her hand, tested its weight. Who said I'm running? She swung. The mechanic managed to get his hand up, protecting his head, but Alex heard the bones of his hand give way with a satisfying crunch. He yowled and stumbled backward into the couch. Alex went for his knee next. The big ones were easier to handle on the ground. He collapsed with a thud. Who are you? She demanded. Who sent you? Fuck off, he snarled. Alex brought the putter down and struck the hard slats of the floor. He was gone, as if he'd melted straight through the floorboards. She stared at the empty place where he had been, the recoil of the strike reverberating through her arms. Something smacked her from behind. Alex fell forward as pain exploded through her skull. She hit the floor and rolled, scrabbling backward. The mechanic was half in and half out of the wall, his body split by the mantel. Alex sprang to her feet, but in the next second he was beside her. His fist shot out, cracking across her jaw. Only North's strength kept her from crumpling. She swung the putter, but the mechanic was already gone. A fist cracked into her from the other side. This time she went down. The mechanic kicked her hard in the side, his boot connecting with her broken ribs. She screamed. He kicked again. "Get your hands on your head." Detective Turner. He was standing at the door, his weapon drawn. The mechanic looked at Turner. He threw his middle fingers up and vanished, melting into the mantel. Alex slumped against the wall and felt North flood out of her, saw him leave her in a blurry tide, reassuming his form, his face frightened and resentful. Was she supposed to feel sorry for him? "I get it," Alex muttered. "But I didn't have a choice." He touched his hand to the wound at his chest as if she'd been the one to shoot him. "Just find Tara," she snapped. "You have the retainer." "The what?" said Turner. He was patting the mantel and the bricked-up hearth beneath it as if expecting to find a secret passage. "Portal magic," Alex grunted out. North looked back once over his shoulder and vanished through the wall of the apartment. Pain came at her in a sudden swell, a time-lapse photograph of a blooming flower, as if North's presence had kept the worst of it at bay and now that she was empty the damage could rush in. Alex tried to push herself up. Turner had holstered his weapon. Turner slammed his fist on the counter. "That isn't possible." "It is," said Alex. "You don't understand," said Turner. He looked at her the way North had, as if Alex had done him a wrong. "That was Lance Gressing. That was my murder suspect. I left him less than an hour ago. Sitting in a jail cell." 21. Winter. Turner had his phone out, and Alex knew what came next. Part of her wanted to let it happen. She wanted the steady beep of hospital machines, the smell of antiseptic, and full of the strongest dope they had to knock her into sleep and away from this pain. Was she dying? She didn't think so. Now that she'd done it once, she figured she'd know. But it felt like she was dying. "Don't." She forced the word out in a rasp. Her throat still hurt like it was being squeezed by Lance Gressing's enormous hands. "No hospital. Did you see that in a movie? How are you going to explain this to a doctor?" "I'll say I found you this way," said Turner. "Okay, how am I going to explain this? And the messed up crime scene. And how I got in here." "How did you get in here?" "I don't need a hospital. Take me to Dawes." "Dawes?" Alex was annoyed that Turner had somehow forgotten Dawes's name. "Oculus." "Fuck this," said Turner. "All of you with your code names and your secrets and your bullshit." She could see the way he was leaping from rage to fear and back again. His mind was trying to erase everything he'd seen. It was one thing to be told magic existed, quite another to have it literally give you the finger. Alex wondered how much Leigh had shared with Centurion. Did they hand him the same Life of Leigh booklet? A long file full of horror stories? A commemorative mug that said monsters are real? Alex had spent her life surrounded by the uncanny, and it had still been hard to let in the reality of Leigh. What would it be like for someone who had grown up in what he believed was an ordinary city, his city, who had been an instrument of order on its streets, to suddenly know that the most basic rules did not apply? She need a doctor? A woman stood in the hall, her cell phone in her hand. "I heard a commotion." Turner flashed his badge. Help is on the way, ma'am. Thank you. That badge was a kind of magic too. But the woman turned to Alex. You okay, honey? I'm good, Alex managed, feeling a pang of warmth for this stranger in a bathrobe, even as she cradled her phone to her chest and shuffled away. Alex tried to raise her head, the pain spiking through her like a whip crack. You need to take me somewhere warded. Someplace they can't get to me, understand? They. Yes, they. Ghosts and ghouls and inmates who can walk through walls. It's all real, Turner, not just a bunch of college kids dressing up in robes. And I need your help. Those were the words that woke him. There's a uniform out front, and I can't carry you past him without answering a whole heap of questions, and you sure can't walk out on your own. I can. But, God, she didn't want to. Reach into my right pocket. There's a little bottle in there with a dropper. He shook his head but dug into Alex's pocket. What is this? Basso belladonna. Just put 2 drops in my eyes. Drugs? Asked Turner. Medication. Of course that placated him. Turner the Eagle Scout. As soon as the first drop hit her eyes, she knew she'd made a bad miscalculation. She felt instantly energized, ready to move, act, but the basso belladonna did nothing to ease the pain, only made her more aware of it. She could feel the places where her broken bones were pressing that they shouldn't, where the blood vessels had burst, the capillaries ruptured and swelling. The drug was telling her brain that everything was okay, that anything was possible, that if she willed it, she could heal herself right now. But the pain was shrieking panic, banging on her awareness, a fist against glass. She could feel a splinter starting, her sanity like a windshield that wasn't meant to break. She'd been called crazy countless times, had sometimes believed it, but this was the first time she'd felt insane. Her heart was thundering. I'm going to die here. You're fine. Through how many late nights and long afternoons had she said that to someone who'd smoked too much, swallowed too much, snorted too much? Breathe through it. You're fine. You're fine. Meet me on Tilton, she told Turner, pushing to her feet. He was beautiful. The basso belladonna had lit his brown skin like a late summer sunset. Light bounced off the short stubble of his shaved head. Medication, my ass. The pain screamed as her broken ribs shifted. This is a terrible idea, he said. The only kind I have. Go on. Turner blew out an exasperated breath and went. Alex's hyped-up mind had already plotted a route down the back hall and out onto the rickety landing. The air was cool and moist against her fevered skin. She could see every grain of the weathered gray wood, feel sweat blooming on her cheeks and turning cold in the winter air. It was going to snow again. Down the little row of steps. Just hop them, said the drug lighting up her system. Please shut up, gasped Alex. Everything seemed to be coated in a smooth, silvery sheen, painted in high gloss. She forced herself to walk instead of run, her bones scraping against each other like a violin bow. The blacktop of the alley behind Tara's apartment glittered, the stink of garbage and piss like a thick, visible haze that she had to push through as if she were underwater. She passed between 2 row houses and onto Tilton. A moment later, a blue Dodge Charger rounded the corner and slowed. Turner hopped out and opened the back door, letting Alex slide into the back seat. Where are we going? He asked. Isle Bastogne. The house on Orange. It was almost worse to lie down and stop moving. All she could think about as she sank into the new car smell of Turner's leather seats was the pain rolling through her. She stared at the bits of sky and rooftop passing by the window, trying to follow their path to Isle Bastogne in her head. How much longer? Dawes would be there. Dawes was always there, but could she help? It's my job. Oculus isn't answering her phone, said Turner. Was Dawes in section? Somewhere in the stacks? What was I seeing back there? He asked. Told you. Portal magic. She said it with confidence, though she couldn't really be sure. She'd thought portal magic was used for traveling big distances or entering secure buildings. Not getting the jump on someone in a beatdown. Portals are scroll and key magic. I thought Tara and Lance might be dealing to them because of Colin Cattry. And Tara's tattoo. Which one? Rather died than doubt. From Idols of the King. She had the strange sense that she'd taken Darlington's place. Did that mean he'd taken hers? God, she hated being this high. Lance said something when he was kicking the crap out of me. He wanted to know who hurt Tara. He didn't do it. Do I need to remind you that he's a criminal? Alex tried to shake her head, then winced. He wasn't bullshitting me. In the panic and fear of the attack, she'd thought she was being hunted again, like with the Gluma. But now she wasn't so sure. He was interrogating me. He thought I'd broken in. You did break in. He wasn't there for me. He came back to the apartment for something else. Yeah, let's talk about that. I explicitly told you not to go anywhere near. Do you want answers, or do you want to keep being an asshole? Lance Gressing didn't kill Tara. You have the wrong guy. Turner said nothing and Alex laughed softly. The effect was not worth the effort. I get it. Either you're crazy and seeing shit, or I'm crazy, and wouldn't it be nicer if I was the crazy one? I have bad news for you, Turner. Neither of us is nuts. Someone wanted you to believe Lance is guilty. But you don't think he is? There was a long silence. Alex heard the tick-tock of the turn signal in time with her heartbeat. At last, Turner said, I checked into the whereabouts of the society members you mentioned. So he'd followed up. He was too good a detective to turn down a lead. Even if it came from Lethe. And? We already knew it was impossible to confirm Trip Helmuth's whereabouts, because no one had eyes on him the whole night. Kate Masters claims she was at manuscript until just after 3 in the morning. Alex grunted as the charger hit a bump. It hurt to talk, but it also helped keep her distracted. Her whole delegation should have been there, she managed. It was a Thursday night. A meeting night. My impression is they were partying late. It's a big building. She easily could have come and gone with no one the wiser. And manuscript was only a few blocks from the crime scene. Could Kate have snuck out, glamored as Lance, to meet Tara? Had it been some kind of game? A high gone wrong? Had Kate intended to hurt Tara? Or was all of this just in Alex's head? What do you know about the kid from Scroll and Key, Colin Cattry? Turner asked. I like him, Alex was surprised to hear herself say. He's nice and he dresses sharp like you, but more European. That's great intel. Alex searched her memory. The Basso Belladonna made it easy to remember the elaborate interior of the Scroll and Key tomb, the patterns of the tiles on the floor. The night of the botched attempt to open a portal to Budapest, Colin had given her an excited little wave when he'd seen her, as if they were rushing the same sorority. Darlington said Colin was one of the best and brightest, doing graduate-level chem work as an undergrad. Headed someplace prestigious next year. Stanford, I think. He never showed at Scroll and Key last Thursday. He was at a party at a professor's house. Bell something. A French name. She wanted to laugh. Not a party. A salon. Colin had been at Bellbaum's salon. Alex was supposed to attend the next one, tomorrow? No, tonight. Her magical summer working in the professor's quiet office and watering her plants had never seemed more far away. But had Colin actually been at the salon? Maybe he'd slipped away. Alex hoped that wasn't the case. Belbaum's world of peppery perfume and gentle conversation felt like a refuge, the reward she probably didn't deserve, but would happily accept. She wanted to keep it separate from all of this mess. Alex felt her awareness drifting, that first bright burst of the basso belladonna letting go. She heard a beep that sounded too loud, then Turner talking over the radio, explaining the damage at Lance and Tara's apartment. Someone looking for drugs. He had pursued on foot but lost the perp. He gave a vague description of a suspect who might have been male or female in a parka that might have been black or dark blue. Alex was surprised to hear him lying, but she knew he wasn't covering for her. He didn't know how to explain Lance or what he'd seen. At last, Turner said, "We're coming up on the green." Alex forced herself to sit up so she could direct him. The world felt red, as if even the air touching her body was out to get her. "Alley," she said, as the dark brick and stained glass of Il Bastone came into view. There were lights on in the parlor window. "Be home, Dawes. Park in back." Alex shut her eyes and released a sigh when the engine stopped. She heard Turner's door slam, and then he was helping her climb out of the car. "Keys," he said. "No keys." She had a worried moment when Turner fumbled with the doorknob, wondering if the house would let him in. But either her presence was enough or it recognized Centurion. The door swung open. Il Bastone made a worried rattle as she entered, the chandeliers tinkling. To anyone else it probably would have felt like a truck rolling by, but Alex could feel the house's concern and it put a lump in her throat. Maybe it just disapproved of so much blood and trauma crossing its threshold, but Alex wanted to believe that the house did not like the suffering of one of its own. Dawes was lying on the parlor carpet in her lumpy sweatshirt. Headphones on. "Hey," said Turner, and repeated, "Hey," when she didn't answer. Dawes jumped. It was like watching a big beige rabbit come to life. She startled and cringed backward at the sight of Turner and Alex in the parlor. "Is she a racist, or just twitchy?" asked Turner. "I'm not a racist," said Dawes. "We're all racists, Dawes," said Alex. "How did you even make it through undergrad?" Dawes's mouth went slack as Turner dragged Alex into the light. "Oh my God. Oh my God. What happened?" "Long story," said Alex. "Can you fix me?" "We should go to the hospital," said Dawes. No," said Alex. "I'm not leaving the wards." "What got you?" "A very big dude." "Then. Who can walk through walls?" "Oh." She pressed her lips together and then said, "Detective Turner, I." "Could you?" "What do you need?" "Goat's milk. I think Elm City Market stocks it." "How much?" "As much as they have. The Crucible will do the rest." "Alex, can you get up the stairs?" Alex glanced at the staircase. She wasn't sure she could. Turner hesitated. "I can." "No," said Alex. "Dawes and I will manage." "Fine," he said, already heading toward the back door. "You're lucky this dump of a town is gentrifying. Like to see me walk into the Family Dollar looking for goat's milk." "You should have let him carry you," Dawes grunted as they made their slow way up the stairs. Alex's body was fighting every step. "Right now he feels guilty for not listening to me. I can't let him make up for it just yet." "Why?" "Because the worse he feels, the more he'll do for us. Trust me. Turner doesn't like to be in the wrong." Another step. Another. Why didn't this place have an elevator? A magical one full of morphine. "Tell me about Scroll and Key." "I thought their magic was waning. The night Darlington and I observed, they couldn't even open a portal to Eastern Europe." they've had a few bad years, trouble getting the best taps. There's been some speculation in Lethe that portal magic is so disruptive it's been eroding the power nexus their tomb is built on. But maybe the locksmiths had been pretending, running a little con, trying to look weaker than they actually were. Why? So that they could perform rituals in secret without Lethe interference? Or was there something shady about the rituals themselves? But how would that connect Colin Cattry to Tara? All Tripp had said was that Tara had mentioned Colin once in passing. There had to be more to it. That tattoo couldn't just be coincidence. Dawes led Alex to the armory and propped her up against Hiram's crucible. It felt like it was vibrating gently, the metal cool against Alex's skin. She had never used the golden bowl, just watched Darlington mix his elixir in it. He had treated it with reverence and resentment. Like any junkie with a drug. The hospital would be safer, Dawes said, rummaging through the drawers in the vast cabinet, opening and closing one after another. Come on, Dawes, Alex said. You gave me that spider egg stuff before. That's different. It was a specific magical cure for a specific magical ailment. You didn't hesitate to drown me. How hard can it be to fix me up? I did hesitate. And none of the societies specialize in healing magic. Why? Alex said. Maybe if she kept talking, her body couldn't give up. Seems like there'd be money in it. Dawes's disapproving frown, that learning should be for the sake of learning look, reminded her painfully of Darlington. Actually, everything she did in this moment was painful. Healing magic is messy, said Dawes. It's the most commonly practiced by lay people, and that means power gets distributed more broadly instead of being drawn to nexuses. There are also strong prohibitions against tampering with immortality. And it isn't like I know exactly what's wrong with you. I can't x-ray you and just cast a spell to mend a broken rib. You could have internal bleeding, or I don't know what. You'll think of something. We're going to try reversion, said Dawes. I can take you back. Will an hour do it? 2 hours? I hope we have enough milk. Are you talking about time travel? Dawes paused with a hand on a drawer. Are you serious? Nope, said Alex hurriedly. I'm just helping your body revert to an earlier version of itself. It's an undoing. Much easier than trying to make new flesh or bone. It's actually a kind of portal magic, so you can thank Scroll and Key for it. I'll send them a note. How far back can you go? Not far. Not without stronger magic and more people to work it. An undoing. Take me back. Make me into someone who has never been done harm. Go as far as you can. Make me brand new. No bruises. No scars. She thought of the moths in their boxes. She missed her tattoos, her old clothes. She missed sitting in the sun with Leigh. She missed the gentle, dilapidated curves of her mother's couch. Alex didn't really know what she missed, only that she was homesick for something, maybe for someone, she'd never been. She ran her hand along the edge of the crucible. Could this thing burn me new? Make it so I'd never have to see another ghost or gray or whatever they decided to call it? And would she even wish for that now? Alex remembered Bellbaum asking what she wanted. Safety. A chance at a normal life. That was what had come to mind in that moment, the quiet of Bellbaum's office, the herbs blooming in the window boxes, a matched set of teacups instead of the chipped mugs of jobs lost and promotional giveaways. She wanted sunlight through the window. She wanted peace. Liar. Peace was like any high. It couldn't last. It was an illusion, something that could be interrupted in a moment and lost forever. Only 2 things kept you safe, money and power. Alex didn't have money. But she did have power. She'd been afraid of it, afraid of staring directly at that blood-soaked night. Afraid she'd feel regret or shame, of saying goodbye to Leigh all over again. But when she'd finally looked, let herself remember. Well, maybe there was something broken and shriveled in her, because she felt only a deep calm in knowing what she was capable of. The Greys had plagued her life, changed it horribly, but after all of those years of torment, they'd finally given something back to her. She was owed. And she'd liked using that power, even the alien feeling of North inside her. She had enjoyed the surprise on Lance's face, on Len's face, on Betcha's. You thought you saw me. See me now. You have to take your clothes off, said Dawes. Alex unbuttoned her jeans, trying to hook her fingers into the waist. Her movements were slow, hampered by pain. I need your help. Reluctantly, Dawes stepped away from the shelves and helped shove the jeans over Alex's hips. But once they were around her ankles, Dawes realized she needed to take off Alex's boots, so Alex stood there in her underwear while Dawes untied her boots and yanked them off. She stood, eyes jumping from Alex's bruised face to the tattooed snakes at her hips, which had once matched those at her clavicles. She'd gotten them after Leigh told her there was a rattler inside her. She liked the idea. Len had wanted to try tattooing her in their kitchen. He'd gotten his own gun and inks online, insisted it was all sterile. But Alex hadn't trusted him or their filthy apartment, and she hadn't wanted him to leave a mark on her, not that way. Can you lift your arms over your head? Dawes said, cheeks red. Alex grunted. Even forming words was getting difficult. I'll get shears. A moment later, she heard the snip of scissors, felt her shirt pulled away from her skin, the fabric sticking to the drying blood. It's okay, said Dawes. You'll feel better as soon as you're in the crucible. Alex realized she was crying. She'd been choked, drowned, beaten, choked again, and nearly killed, but now she was crying over a shirt. She'd bought it new at Target before she'd come to school. It was soft and fit well. She hadn't owned many new things. Alex's head felt heavy. If she could just close her eyes for a minute. For a day. She heard Dawes say, I'm sorry. I can't get you in. Turner will have to help. Was he back from the market? She hadn't heard him return. She must have blacked out. Something soft moved over Alex's skin and she realized Dawes had wrapped her in a sheet, pale blue, from Dante's room. My room. Bless Dawes. Is she in some kind of shroud? Turner's voice. Alex forced herself to open her eyes, saw Turner and Dawes emptying cartons of milk into the crucible. Turner's head moved back and forth like a searchlight, a slow scan, taking in the strangeness of the upper floors. Alex felt proud of Isle Bastogne, the armory with its cabinet of curiosities, the bizarre golden bathtub at its center. She meant to be brave, to grit her teeth through the pain, but she screamed when Turner lifted her. A moment later, she was sinking beneath the cool surface, the sheet unwrapping, blood staining the goat's milk in veins of pink. It looked like a strawberry sundae cup, the kind with the wooden spoon. Don't touch the milk. Dawes was shouting. I'm trying to keep her from drowning. Turner barked back. He had his hands cradled around her head. I'm all right, said Alex. Let me go. You're both nuts, said Turner, but she felt his grip ease. Alex let herself sink beneath the surface. The cool of the milk seemed to seep straight through her skin, coating the pain. She held her breath as long as she could. She wanted to stay below, feel the milk cocoon around her. But eventually she let her toes find the bottom of the crucible and pushed back to the surface. When she emerged, Dawes and Turner were both shouting at her. She must have stayed beneath the surface a little too long. I'm not drowning, she said. I'm fine. And she was. There was still pain, but it had receded, her thoughts felt sharper, and the milk was changing too, becoming clearer and more watery. Turner looked like he might be sick, and Alex thought she understood why. Magic created a kind of vertigo. Maybe the sight of a girl on the brink of death descending into a bathtub, and then emerging whole and healthy seconds later was just one spin too many on this ride. "I need to get to the station," he said. He turned and strode out the door. "I don't think he likes us, Dawes." "It's okay," Dawes said, picking up the heap of Alex's bloodied clothes. "We had too many friends already." Dawes left to make Alex something to eat, claiming she'd be famished once the reversion was complete. "Do not drown while I'm gone," she said, and left the door to the armory open behind her. Alex lay back in the crucible, feeling her body change, the pain leaching out of her, and something, the milk or whatever it had become in Dawes's enchantment, filling her up. She heard music coming from the tinny sound system, the sound so staticky it was hard to pick out a tune. She dumped her head beneath the surface again. It was quiet here, and when she opened her eyes it was like looking through mist, watching the last traces of milk and magic fade. A pale shape loomed before her, came into focus. A face. Alex sucked in a breath, choking down water. She burst through the surface, coughing and sputtering, arms crossed over her breasts. The bridegroom's reflection stared up at her from the water. "You can't be here," she said. "The wards." "I told you," his reflection said, "wherever water pools or gathers, we can speak now. Water is the element of translation. It is the mediary. So you're going to be showering with me?" North's cold face didn't change. She could see the dark shore behind him in the reflection. It looked different than it had the first time, and she remembered what Dawes had said about the different borderlands. She must not be looking into Egypt this time, or whatever version of Egypt she had traveled to when she'd crossed the Nile. But Alex could see the same dark shapes on the shore, human and inhuman. She was glad they couldn't reach her here. "What did you do to me at Tara's apartment?" North said. He sounded haughtier than ever, his accent more clipped. "I don't know what to tell you," said Alex, because it felt truer than most things. There wasn't really time to ask for permission. "But what did you do? How did you do it?" "Stay with me." "I don't really know." She didn't understand any of it. Where the ability had come from. Why she could see things no one else could. Was it buried somewhere in her bloodline? In the genes of the father she'd never met? Was it in her grandmother's bones? The Greys had never dared approach in Estria Stern's house, the candles lit at the windows. If she'd lived longer, would she have found a way to protect Alex? "I gave you my strength," said North. No, thought Alex. "I took it." But she doubted North would appreciate the distinction. "I know what you did to those men," said North. "I saw when you let me inside." Alex shivered. All the warmth and well-being that had poured into her as she'd soaked in the milk bath was no match for the thought of a Grey rattling around in her head. What else had the bridegroom seen? It doesn't matter. Unlike Darlington, North couldn't share her secrets with the world. No matter how many layers of the veil he pierced, he was still trapped in death. "You have enemies on this side of the veil, Galaxy Stern," he continued. "Leonard Beacon. Mitchell Betts. Ariel Harrell. A whole host of men you sent to the darker shore. Daniel Arlington." Except he'd said Darlington wasn't on the other side. A murmur rose from the shapes behind the bridegroom, the same sound she'd heard when she waded into the Nile. Jean du Monde. Jonathan Montana. It might not even be a name. The syllables sounded strange and wrong, as if spoken by mouths not made to form human language. And what about Leigh? Was she happy where she was? Was she safe from Len? Or would they find each other behind the veil, and make their own misery there? Yeah, well, I have enemies on this side too. Instead of looking up my old buddies, how about you find Tara? Why don't you seek out Darlington's notebooks? I've been busy. And it's not like you're going anywhere. How glib you are. How sure of yourself. There was a time when I had the same confidence. Time took it. Time takes everything, Miss Stern. But I didn't have to go looking for your friends. After what you did to me, at Tara Hutchins's residence, they came looking for me. They could smell your power on me like stale smoke. You've deepened the bond between us. Perfect. Exactly what she needed. Just find Tara. I have hope that repellent object will draw her to me. But her death was brutal. She may be recovering somewhere. The other side can be a dismaying place for the new dead. Alex hadn't thought of that. She had just assumed people crossed over into some kind of understanding. Painlessness. Tranquility. She looked again at the surface of the water, that wobbling reflection of the bridegroom, at those monstrous shapes somewhere behind him, and shivered. How had Helllight passed into the next world? Her death had been, well, in some ways, compared to Tara, compared to Len and Betcha and Ariel, she had passed in relative peace. It was still death. It was still death too soon. Find her, said Alex. Find Tara so I can figure out who hurt her and Turner can put him away before he hurts me. North frowned. I don't know that the detective is a good partner in this endeavor. Alex leaned back against the curve of the crucible. She wanted to get out of the water, but she wasn't sure if she was supposed to. Not used to seeing a black man with a badge? I haven't been holed up in my tomb for the last 100 years, Miss Stern. I know the world has changed. His tomb. Where are you buried? My bones are in Evergreen. His lip curled. It's quite the tourist attraction. And Daisy? Her family had her interred in their mausoleum on Grove Street. That's why you're always lurking around there. I'm not lurking. I go to pay my respects. You go because you're hoping she'll see you doing your penance and forgive you. When North was mad, his face changed. It looked less human. I did not hurt Daisy. Temper, crooned Alex. But she didn't want to provoke him further. She needed him, and she could make a gesture toward peace. I'm sorry about what I did at the apartment. No, you're not. So much for peace. No, I'm not. North turned his head away. His profile looked like it had been cut for a coin. It wasn't an entirely unenjoyable experience. Now, that surprised her. No. It was. I had forgotten what it felt like to be in a body. Alex considered. She shouldn't deepen the bond. But if he could look inside her head when he entered her, maybe his thoughts would be open to her too. She'd gotten little sense of him in the panic of the fight. You can come back in, if you like. He hesitated. Why? Because there was intimacy in the act? Or because he had something to hide? Dawes bustled through the door, a tray heaped with dishes in her hands. She set it down on the map cabinet. I kept it simple. Mashed potatoes. Macaroni and cheese. Tomato soup. Green salad. As soon as the smell hit, Alex's stomach began to rumble and saliva filled her mouth. Bless you, Dawes. Can I get out of this thing? Dawes glanced at the tub. It looks clear. If you're going to eat, I'll stay, said North. His voice was steady, but he looked eager in the mirror of the water. Dawes handed Alex the towel and helped her climb awkwardly from the tub. Can I be alone for a minute? Dawes's eyes narrowed. What are you going to do? Nothing. Just eat. But if you hear anything, Don't worry about knocking. Just come on in. I'll be downstairs, Dawes said warily. She closed the door behind her. Alex leaned over the crucible. North was waiting in the reflection. Want in? She asked. Submerge your hand, he muttered, as if asking her to disrobe. But, of course, she'd already disrobed. She dumped her hand beneath the surface. I'm not a murderer, said North, reaching for her. She smiled and let her fingers clasp his. Of course not, she said. Neither am I. She was looking through a window. She felt excited, a sense of pride and comfort she'd never known. The world was hers. This factory, more modern than Brewster's or Hooker's. The city before her. The woman beside her. Daisy. She was exquisite, her face precise and lovely, her hair in curls that brushed the collar of her high-neck dress, her soft white hands buried in a fox fur muff. She was the most beautiful woman in New Haven, maybe Connecticut, and she was his. Hers. Mine. Daisy turned to him, her dark eyes mischievous. Her intelligence sometimes unnerved him. It was not quite feminine, and yet he knew it was what elevated her over all of the belles of the Elm City. Perhaps she was not really the most beautiful. Her nose was too sharp, her lips too thin, but oh the words that spilled from them, laughing and quick and occasionally naughty. And there was absolutely nothing to fault in her figure or her clever smile. She was simply more alive than anyone he'd ever met. These calculations were made in a moment. He could not stop making them, because always they tallied to a sense of triumph and contentment. What is it you're thinking, Bertie? She asked in her playful voice, sidling closer. Only she used that name with him. Her mate had come with them, as was proper, but Gladys had hung back in the hallway and now he saw her through the window drifting toward the green, the strings of her bonnet trailing from her hand as she plucked a sprig of dogwood from the trees. He hadn't had much cause to speak to Gladys, but he would make more of an effort. Servants heard everything, and it would pay to have the ear of the woman closest to the woman who would be his wife. He turned away from the window to Daisy glowing like a piece of milky glass against the polished wood of his new office. His desk, along with the new safe, had been built especially for the space. He'd already spent several late nights here working in comfort. I was thinking of you, of course. She tapped him on the arm, drawing closer still. Her body had a sway to it that might have been unseemly in another woman, but not in Daisy. You needn't flirt with me anymore. She held up her hand, fluttered her fingers, the emerald glinting on them. I've already said yes. He snatched her hand from the air and pulled her near. Something in her eyes kindled, but with what? Desire? Fear? She was sometimes impossible to read. In the mirror above the mantel, he saw the two of them, and the image thrilled him. Let's go to Boston after the wedding. We can drive up to Maine for our honeymoon. I don't want a long sea voyage. She only lifted a brow and smiled. Bertie, Paris was part of the bargain. But why? We have time to see the whole world. You have time. I will be a mother to your children and a hostess to your business partners. But for a moment, she stood on tiptoe, her lips a bare breath from his, the heat of her body palpable as her fingers pressed against his arm. I might simply be a girl seeing Paris for the first time, and we might simply be lovers. The word hit him like a hammer swing. Paris it is, he said on a laugh, and kissed her. It was not their first kiss, but like every kiss with Daisy it felt new. A creak sounded on the stairs, then a rolling sound, like someone stumbling. Daisy pulled away. Gladys has the very worst timing. But over Daisy's shoulder, Bertie could see Gladys still drifting dreamily along the green, her white cap bright against the dogwoods. He turned and saw nothing, no one, an empty doorway. Daisy sucked in a startled breath. The edge of his vision blurred, a dark blot spreading like flame, catching at the corner of a page, eating along its edge. He cried out as he felt something like pain, something like fire, pierce his skull. A voice said, "They cut me open. They wanted to see my soul." "Daisy," he gasped. The word came out garbled. He was lying on his back, in an operating theater. Men stood above him. "Boys, really?" "Something's wrong," one said. "Just finish," shouted another.